Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is a fired up Logan Camden who has clearly activated playoff mode because it's that time of the year, baby. We're already previewing playoff series today because we've got 4 of them set in stone. We've got the play-ins throughout this week. We've got the playoffs starting on Saturday. It's just a fantastic time to be a basketball fan, is it not, Logan? Have you activated playoff mode? Can you confirm?
I flipped the switch. I'm all geeked up. It's the most wonderful time of year. Some would say it's Christmas, Carson, but we all know it's NBA playoff basketball.
You get hopped up on Mountain Dew and you just lean back and you just watch 8 hours of basketball in a day. It really is a spectacular thing. And by the way, considering that we have activated playoff mode, we're going to be in your guys' ears. We're going to be on your guys' screens every single day of this week and basically every single day for the next couple months. So you better get ready for a lot of LC to Kid getting a good look at his beautiful, beautiful mug. Today, though, we're talking about the 3-6 and 4-5 playoff series in both conferences because those are the matchups that are official. And I want to start, Logan, with the one that I am most excited about on paper, Nuggets-Timberwolves. It doesn't really get any better than this for a first-round matchup, both because of the caliber of these two teams, like we both had them in our top 6 title contenders, but also, of course, because of the history here and what a rivalry this has been in recent years. I do want to take us back for a moment to 2024, Logan, because last time we saw these two teams square off in the playoffs, we got one of the craziest playoff series ever, legitimately. Like, starts with 2 completely dominant defensive performances by Minnesota to take both games in Denver over the defending champs at that time, and that included one of the greatest defensive performances I've ever seen in Game 2 when they held them to 80, and that was without Rudy Gobert, so just like this absolute statement by the T-Wolves. Then Denver storms back, takes 3 straight. Jokic averages 33, 9, and 10 on 67% true shooting over those 3 games, plays one of the greatest games I've ever seen offensively in Game 5, and so at that point you think, okay, Denver has them figured out. Denver has surged back and they've taken control of this series. Nope. Minnesota then destroys them by 45 in Game 6, and then you have this super dramatic, ugly rock fight Game 7. Denver goes up 20 early in the second half. Minnesota comes back. You have the Gobert shot, to this day one of the craziest moments that I've ever seen, that ridiculous fadeaway. It was just absolute insanity all around. And whenever these two teams have faced off ever since as divisional rivals with their respective superstars, there's been a lot of bad blood and there's been a lot of epic basketball played. So this has to be the matchup you're most excited for too, right? Just as like a fan.
Definitely. I mean, it's dampened a little bit by the fact that we're not 100% certain about Anthony Edwards' injury status, but I'm very, very excited for this. There's no love lost between either of these two teams.
There is not. They've played 18 times since 2024, including the playoffs, in games that both Jokic and Ant have played. The Timberwolves are 11-7 in those games, but the Nuggets won 2 of 3 such games this season. So there's a lot of history here. Before we get into some of the particular keys to this series, I just want to ask, do you think this is how the Nuggets wanted the seeding to shake out? Because all this stuff was still in play on the final day of the season, and they sat everybody other than Jokic essentially just to get him to the 65 game mark. If they had lost, they would have gotten the Rockets in the first round, the Thunder in the second round. But with how things shook out here, they get the Timberwolves in the first round, which is, I think, definitely a tougher first-round matchup. But then they have the Spurs in the second round, which I think we both agree is a much more winnable series for them than the Thunder. So how do you sort of weigh that out? Like, what do you think is actually the better outcome for Denver?
I think this was probably the ideal scenario, all things considered. Just being able to avoid Oklahoma City until the Western Conference Finals. And just interrelated with that, you're kind of just crossing your fingers that another team can push OKC 6-7 games, really make them work in a couple of series, and then hopefully they're a little bit banged up, when you play them eventually. That would have been my goal, just avoid OKC for as long as you can, because that's the most problematic matchup, I think, for the Nuggets in these playoffs.
I agree. I think they're so much more comfortable against the Spurs based on what we've seen that they will take having to go through the first round Minnesota gauntlet, but it's definitely scary. And it's interesting from the Spurs perspective too, because you would think they definitely were incentivized to win that game because they could have gotten the best of both worlds. They could have avoided Denver and OKC until the Western Conference Finals, and I've seen some people really trashing them for basically just punting on that game and not playing Wemby, and I understand that perspective, but I also do think like you have to include in the calculus that Wemby is actively dealing with the bruised rib. And even though he played in the game before this, he was like, yeah, I was able to do it, but there was a lot of discomfort. So it's not like, oh, we're just trying to buy him one regular day of rest when that may come back to bite us because he ends up having to play in like more difficult playoff series, or it's the reason we get eliminated in the second round because we're facing Denver instead of the Timberwolves or whatever. Like, I just don't think it's that simple when your best player is injured, even if it's not like a super big thing. But I do see both sides of it because the Spurs could have had like, not a cakewalk to the Western Conference Finals. There's no such thing, but they could have avoided like clearly the two scariest teams.
Yeah, but I think the Wemby injury went into the math of it. I think that was the biggest thing. And you'd rather be certain of your best player being fully healthy no matter what the path is going to be, because eventually you're going to have to beat a great basketball team to get to the end of the road regardless, you know?
Yep, this is true. This is true. Okay, so let's get into the keys of this matchup then. I want to start with your baby boy, Logan, Anthony frickin' Edwards. How do you think Denver is going to approach guarding him in this series? How do you expect him to fare in this series?
I'd sell out on Ant if he's available, and obviously that's the big thing. We talked about this a lot in the lead-up. Ant has been dealing with some runner's knee, some right knee inflammation in the lead-up to the playoffs, and that is very, very problematic for Minnesota, considering he's one of the best offensive players on the planet and the biggest key component to them beating Denver in this head-to-head matchup. If Ant's not 100%, I'll say it pretty clearly. I'm going to take Denver convincingly. Like, that is a huge piece of why I would go with Denver. As to how I would defend him, because, right, Ant has destroyed Denver head-to-head. There's not really anybody that can hold him or stay in front of him individually one-on-one, and I'm doing two things if I'm the Denver defense. I'm throwing a ton of double teams at him. I am going to be relentless at it, and I would consider maybe like pre-rotating and putting a wing defender maybe on Gobert and having Jokic kind of roam off somewhere just to completely sell out on Ant. Like, I am diverting as much attention as possible to him, and I am almost going to completely ignore, I feel like, Gobert in the half court. Ant scares me so much more than anybody else on Minnesota, and like we mentioned, they can't hold him in single coverage. So I want Ant to beat me as a playmaker. I want him to beat me with excellent decision-making throughout the duration of the series. I know he can kill me with the pull-up three-point shooting. I know he can kill me at the rim. So I want him to just have to work. And that's the goal for any superstar that you're going to take on in the playoffs. You just want to make them work as hard as they can. And I think I'm selling out on him, sending double teams, making him beat me as a decision-maker and a playmaker. And this is easier said than done, too, because of the leap that we saw Ant take in the regular season as a mid-range scorer. I would try to force him to take as many mid-range jumpers as possible, too. Again, I think a lot of this is easier said than done, but he's so good at getting to the rim. He's so good at killing teams as a pull-up three-point shooter. Again, I think to make life as difficult as possible on Ant in this series, it is making him beat you as a playmaker and as an over-the-top mid-range scorer. And like I said, I think there are some buttons that Denver can push. I'm not scared of Gobert. Neither team is, and so I'm diverting a ton of attention off of him, and I'm diverting it to Ant. I agree with you. I think that's the first problem that this Denver defense is going to have to solve, and that's how I'd address it. I don't really think there's a good matchup. Ideally, the primary matchup would be Peyton Watson if he's available, right? And are we trending towards a world in which Peyton is going to be available for this first round or no? Because I think he's probably the ideal matchup for Ant.
I tend to agree. I think that they're going to start Brown, and I think that they're going to put Brown on him. And then I think if Watson is available, I would probably play him more. Like, I just don't think they're going to actually change the starting lineup, but I do think that Watson is as good of an Ant defender as Brown is. Neither of them are great necessarily, but both of them are like good enough options. And then I think Where things really become a factor is on the other side of the ball, where Watson has just been so much more reliable as a three-point shooter. He's shooting 41% from deep this year. Brown is shooting 30%. So when you think about Denver being at their most potent offensively and being able to really punish the Timberwolves for trying to keep Gobert around the basket if they were to try to use him as a roamer off of Brown, although there's some other complicating factors there. But you want to be able to just blitz them with a bunch of shooting around Murray and Jokic, and I think that Watson is a better option to do that than Brown. While he is also a solid Ant defender, the reality is the best Ant defender in this matchup, in my opinion, is Aaron Gordon, but they can't put him as Ant's primary defender because they need him to be able to guard Julius Randle, who I also think he is a very good option to throw at. So Aaron Gordon being back is just a really, really big deal for the Denver defense because he's their best defender by a lot. But I did go back and pull Ant's field goal percentage by primary defender in this matchup since 2024. And keep in mind, it's a sample of about 45 to 50 shots against all these guys. Very even between the three of them. So not a huge sample, but he shot 60% actually when guarded by Peyton Watson, 47% when guarded by Brown, 43% when guarded by Gordon. And I think Gordon is the guy who has been the best physical counter to him. He's the guy who's provided the most resistance. But as we said, I think that they need him guarding Julius Randle in his minutes. You mentioned the possibility of putting Gordon on Gobert. The reason that I actually don't like that is because I think whoever Jokic is guarding, Ant is just going to call up to set a screen for him. And so if Jokic is guarding Julius Randle, I actually think that's more problematic because it's much easier to put two up at the level and say, okay, Gobert, now you have to beat us off the roll, than it is to say, okay, we're going to give Julius Randle a head of steam or leave him open for a pick and pop three because he's just a much better offensive player. I think you want Jokic on Gobert, and then you're just going to test Gobert and his ability to beat 4-on-3s.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I would do. I would put Jokic at the level. I would have a really hard hedge on Ant towards the middle. And then I'm okay because then even if Ant gets that back pass on the back line to Gobert at the basket, I'm going to trust either of my backline guys on the baseline to try and strip him before he can even go up with the basketball. So honestly, I'm okay all series long if Gobert is going to punish me on the inside. One, it's 2 points at the rim, and we also all know how uncoordinated and discombobulated Rudy Gobert can get on even a clean catch. So I would be content with letting Gobert kill me if that's the scenario, but I'm selling out on Ant basically all series long in the half court.
Yeah, it's all about just making sure that you catch Gobert early enough off the roll, right? Getting a body on him, tagging around the free throw line to where he's not getting deep position, right? And you're not spoon feeding him under the basket. He's still 12, 15 feet out, and then he has to make a decision. He has to make a play. If he hesitates, then you're allowed to recover defensively and maybe you negate the advantage. I just think we've absolutely seen, both just watching and also digging into the numbers, that defenses have been right to force the ball out of Ant's hands this year, specifically to force it into the hands of Gobert and to make him a decision maker and to make Ant beat you as a playmaker, like you said. I also think we're going to see Denver shell up at times against Ant. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be hard doubles. I think maybe we'll see a bit of that, but I think we'll see a lot of slanting the defense towards him, loading up, maybe even a mixture of zone, but just generally all eyes on Anthony Edwards, making it difficult for him to really attack some of those gaps as a driver, right? Getting in there, digging in, and again, testing him as a mid-range shot maker, testing him as a passer, all the things that you're saying. Try to force him to settle for some deep pull-up threes over the top if he's looking at sort of this muddy picture and he's just like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, I do think there are ways schematically that Denver can make Ant uncomfortable, definitely more so than they can with personnel because they don't really have great personnel to throw at him. But I do think it's great that with Aaron Gordon on Randle, like they can always switch that if they ever try to get into the Ant-Randle two-man game. And especially if Watson is the Ant defender who you're then switching on to Randle, like I think Watson can hold his own relatively well in that matchup if Randle tries to go sort of mismatch attacking mode. So Ant's been really good against Denver consistently. I mean, since 2024, including the playoffs, almost 29 points a game, 5.6 assists, 60% true shooting, about 3 turnovers, but he's led the team to like a 118 offensive rating and has really given Denver some trouble. But I do think it's really significant that Aaron Gordon is going to be back out there throughout this series because in so many ways, on both sides of the ball, he's just the X factor for this Denver team. He's the best Randall defender. He's the best Ant defender. He's honestly the best team defender that they have. And then also, once you get into some of the offensive dynamics, he does some really, really important stuff for them and just provides so much value in so many different ways. And they've been such an awesome team when he's on the court. So I do think with AG in the mix, with David Adelman, who I do think is somebody who is always very willing to get aggressive and to get funky and to get gimmicky with his scheme, which I think are the right things to do against an Anthony Edwards. Like, I think Denver can hold their own defensively in this matchup because they know what they need to do. It's really big if they have both Gordon and Watson available, just very important personnel pieces. And this Minnesota offense has been having some issues. Like, Gobert is always exploitable as an offensive player in the playoffs. And there are phases where Ant and Randall can both struggle with their decision-making and they can have some turnover issues. And this Minnesota offense just hasn't been playing well for a while. So I do think this is overall a good matchup for Ant and for Minnesota, but I also do think that Denver has some answers in this matchup. And so I look at what they can do defensively, and I think they can hold their own enough to where their offensive superpower can pull them through in this series. Because when I look at the other side of the ball, I feel like there are some subtle things that have changed on both sides that make this a much better matchup for Denver this time around than it was a couple years ago. And I feel like their offense is very well equipped with solutions to what Minnesota can kind of throw at them defensively. So how do you feel about that other side of the ball, Minnesota dealing with Jokic in this Denver offense?
Yeah, I completely agree with your assessment, and I don't know if those changes are so subtle. I think they're very big changes, and I think they make a very meaningful difference to me in this series, and it's a big component in why I lean Denver. I mean, when I look at them in comparison to the last time they met in the playoffs, I think Minnesota has gotten worse, and I think Denver has gotten better. Specifically, you look at Minnesota losing a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and this is regardless of the leap that he's taken as the most improved player in basketball this year in Atlanta. It's what he provided to this team as an elite point of an attack defender, a supplementary ball handler, an elite spot-up shooter. But it's more so that point of attack defense that is the biggest loss for this Minnesota team defense as a whole, right? He was just such an important cog where when you look at the chain link defense, so to speak, for Minnesota, you've got Ant, you've got Nov, you've got McDaniels, you've got Rudy Gobert, you've got Randall. Like, there's not really a weak point. And so just by losing a guy like N.A. There's somebody that you can attack, and one less guy that's going to be a real difference maker on Jamal Murray. And that's another big guy that I would point to in this matchup, where last time in the 24 playoffs, Jamal Murray gave you 18, 4-4 on 48% true shooting versus Minnesota in the regular season this year. The guy's giving you 32, 5-7 on less than league average true shooting, but the volume has certainly been there. And not only does Minnesota lose Nickeil, Denver has added a bomb squad. You know, their bench has gotten a lot better with guys like Valanciunas and Bruce Brown, but most notably adding in flamethrowers like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Cam Johnson, who have really been hitting their stride post-All-Star break. Cam Johnson post-All-Star break is 13, 4-3 on 65.3% true shooting. Tim Hardaway Jr. is 12, 3-1 on 60.1% true shooting. And so it's not just the players, but when we dive into the chess match between Denver and Minnesota specifically, what does it begin with? It's always the Murray-Jokic pick and roll. Okay. How do you counter that? Well, traditionally, most teams have to divert three guys into the action to neutralize it, right? Because you're either conceding a Jamal Murray pull-up jump shot over the top, which is always a really great look unless he gets suffocated on ball, or Jokic is getting a look. So you send three, you neutralize that action. How do you beat them sending an extra defender? Elite spot-up shooting surrounding them. And that is where I think I lean Denver taking that advantage, because now, instead of being flanked by a guy like Christian Brown, which, don't get me wrong, he's going to get his minutes, and he could shit his pants shooting the ball spot-up in his minutes. But now Denver has that lever that they can pull where they go, oh, Christian Brown isn't making his shots. Boom. We've got Cam Johnson. Aaron Gordon's healthy. We've got Peyton Watson now, who's shooting the cover off the ball this year. We've got Tim Hardaway Jr. They have different options and different looks that they can throw at Minnesota that it's elite spot-up shooting now. They're not going to have guys that leave them hanging when Minnesota has to load up in that action with Jokic and Murray, which we have said repeatedly is one of the easiest and best offensive actions in the history of basketball. That's not hyperbole. That's just rationalization, right? Denver's been the best offense in basketball all year long, and it's because of that foundation. But now with the added shooting, we said it all the time when Denver, we thought were at their peak offensively. It's pick your poison. I think this Denver offense is its most deadly that it's ever
100%.
been in the history of Jokic and Murray. And so more so than anything else, I think it's the biggest strength and superpower in this matchup. And that more so than anything else is why I leave Denver head-to-head in this one.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there are some of those specific dynamic changes that you touched on, like losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a big deal specifically for dealing with Jamal Murray, because if you look to that 2024 series, like Nah clamped him. And so much of what Minnesota was doing was pressuring the ball like crazy and extending their defense so much and wearing down Jamal, who also was not 100% in that series, right? He was dealing with like the quad thing, I believe it was, that was limiting his explosiveness a little bit. But the dynamics really change when now, instead of having like two all-world point of attack defenders you can throw at Jamal throughout the game, you've only got the one in Jaden McDaniels, and like Dante is still a pretty good on-ball defender, and Ant is still a pretty good on-ball defender, but they're not the level of like problems whatsoever that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was. And then also like Jamal has just been unreal this season. Like he's completely leveled up as a playmaker, as an isolation scorer specifically, which is a really big deal because that's where a couple years ago it did feel like, okay, if you put him against a super athletic physical perimeter defense like this, like he could get overwhelmed because he didn't really have that burst. He didn't really have that ability to create separation as much on an island, and this year he's just been phenomenal as an isolation scorer and just like a ridiculous pull-up shooter overall. And I really expect this to be a Jamal revenge series because I thought he got completely dogged a couple years ago in this matchup, and I think he is going to fare much, much better around this time.
I think so too, and it's specifically the fact that Minnesota isn't going to be able to switch everything as easily without a guy like N.A. Like that is really what matters to me because they're just not as switchable. I mean, it's really as simple as that. You're going to create an advantage for somebody if it's Gobert out in space having to switch on to a guy like Jamal, or if it's Jokic getting that mismatch on the interior. And, I think Jamal is primed to eat in a big way. One, because the matchup has gotten easier, but like you said, this has been the best year of Jamal's career, and he's always been a playoff riser. You know, he's a clutch, big spot kind of performer, but this is the most consistent he's been end-to-end of any season of his career.
Yeah, and I think there was a time where it was like, oh yeah, Jamal just always levels up in the playoffs because of what he did in the bubble and what he did in 2023. And then in 2024, that was obviously not the case. And last year, it also was not the case. I just think he's a better player now, where you're not like having to rely on him flipping some switch. It's like, yeah, he's just been an all-NBA level guy this entire season. He's been one of the best offensive players in basketball this season. He's been like a perfect number two to Jokic. He's done a better job carrying the non-Jokic minutes than ever before. And so I just think you're talking about a different beast with this version of Jamal. I also think, though, what is really significant when you think back to this playoff matchup 2 years ago is the loss of Karl Anthony Towns. Because as much as I talk about Cat as being like one of the worst defensive centers that I've had the displeasure of watching in my lifetime, the one thing that he was damn good at and you can never take away from him, and it totally changed the dynamic of that playoff series and even the year before, not just being large. I mean, yeah, that's a big part of it, but like, he was a really, really good Jokic post defender when he had Rudy Gobert behind him. And now the Timberwolves have just totally lost that dynamic. Like they've tried at times to put Randall on Jokic with Gobert roaming, but it just doesn't work nearly as well because Randall, he's big, he's strong. He's not big and strong enough to really provide resistance to Jokic. And so if Jokic can just bully you and get over his shoulder to a little hook shot, like Gobert can't really affect him as a roamer. And Jokic can still make those shots at like a 65-70% clip when you're talking about those paint touch shots, just going over the top of a guy like Julius Randle. So we think back to 2024 and even 2023, like the Timberwolves did a sneaky good job on Jokic in that series too. He had a couple of ugly shooting nights, and that was his toughest offensive series of like a completely dominant offensive playoff run overall. But over the last 2 years, since Cat left, Jokic versus the Timberwolves averages 35.5 points and 10.4 assists per game on 74% true shooting. He has had some turnover issues, 4.5 turnovers a game, but like it's been a different story for him in this matchup since the Cat trade. And Gobert is still a challenge for him to deal with, but Gobert was so much more disruptive as the roamer than he is as a one-on-one Jokic defender. And so because they don't have Cat now, and also because of Gordon's shooting leap, they can't use Gobert as a roamer off of Aaron Gordon, because a couple years ago, it was still at the point where, like, if you're funneling a bunch of shots to Aaron Gordon threes, like, that was a win for the defense. And I just love Aaron Gordon so much, and I give him so much credit for looking at exactly what he needs to improve in his game and improving it like so rapidly and so dramatically to where now it's like, yeah, he's a 40% three-point shooter very consistently. And so you take away the ability of the Timberwolves to use Gobert in the role in which he was most destructive as that full-time roamer and helper. Now, again, maybe they're going to try doing that with him roaming off of Christian Brown, but then that does present some issues because now you're giving a favorable one-on-one matchup to Jokic, again, with Randle, who doesn't offer as much resistance, and now you're going to have to downsize with who's guarding Aaron Gordon, and so maybe he's able to eat you alive as a mismatch attacker on the offensive glass, what have you, and then Denver can always just pull Christian Brown, and they can go with THJ, they can go with Peyton Watson if he's healthy. Like, they just have so many options and so many solutions, and so when it comes to just guarding Jokic out of the post, that's a problem, because as good as Gobert is, again, nobody in terms of one-on-one post defense other than like maybe Ivica Zubac really holds their own against Jokic. And so Jokic has shot 60% from the field when guarded by Gobert over the last 2 years. He just cooks him one-on-one. He's too strong. The touch is too good. The footwork is too good. Like, he's going to get to a good shot if you don't double or if you don't have that roaming elite rim protecting presence. So that's why he's had these scoring explosions against them over the last couple years. It's because they're willing to guard him on an island more so with Gobert because they don't really have another great option like they used to. And so that's where he scored 61 on them last year. He scored 56 on them this year. That was in an overtime game. But I think this could be a huge Jokic scoring series because he's going to kind of have to go at Gobert one-on-one a lot, but he's comfortable in that matchup. He wins that matchup. And then, as you mentioned, there's the pick and roll dynamics of how phenomenal it was when they had the ability to involve Gobert as the third pick and roll defender, and he could blow shit up. And they did all this really, really smart stuff where, like, they would keep Cat attached to Jokic as a body off the pop at all times and off the roll. So it's like Jokic wasn't getting anything off the roll. And then they were funneling Jamal Murray into Rudy Gobert, and he's Rudy Gobert. He's this all-time rim protector. Like, so much of that changes when now you have to worry about high-level three-point shooters all over the floor. And so that's a really big deal. Like, the fact that Denver is now first in three-point percentage and they're 11th in threes made this season, like, it's just a dynamic that this offense hasn't previously had. And then you have sort of the inverted pick and roll where you can get Gobert to go under and Jokic can get himself some open looks, or potentially he can force a mismatch and play some bully ball as a driver. And then you have the non-Gobert minutes, and that's where, like, he can really eat you alive. He's got a 78% true shooting percentage when guarded by Julius Randle this year. So the Randle-Nas front court has not been able to do anything with Jokic. Like, I just think they check so many boxes and they have so many answers. You're talking about the best shooting, the best depth, the best Jokic, the best Murray. They don't have to deal with Nah. They don't have to deal with Gobert as a roamer and Cat as a post defender. Like, I just think this offense is next level, and Minnesota has lost a couple of the ingredients to really make them uncomfortable. And you don't really need to overcomplicate it. We can get into all the particulars of the matchup, but, like, bottom line, when Murray and Jokic play together, Denver has a 131 offensive rating. When Murray, Jokic, and Aaron Gordon play together, they have a 135 offensive rating. Like, we're just talking about one of the best offenses, one of the best half-court offenses especially, that we've ever seen, that's more complete than ever, with maybe the greatest offensive player ever. Like, I'm just really, really confident in that Denver offense right now, more so than ever before, especially in this matchup, which previously has been something of a challenge for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, now Minnesota has less answers, and I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to think about who they could turn to off the bench or something that could give them any kind of different look or spark, and I just don't see it, right?
Yeah, slow-mo on Jokic with Gobert roaming. Maybe they try that at some point. But
yeah.
there's just nothing really good that they
exactly.
can turn to.
They're missing a really key archetype on their bench, and it's that big body, that kind of cat build guy that you're talking about. And in this matchup specifically, it doesn't even have to be somebody that's skilled, right? Like, obviously, it makes those offensive lineups way more viable alongside a guy like Rudy Gobert when you have a big that's that skilled. But it's really just you need somebody who's really long, tall, and big and can just physically match up with Jokic, and that guy's not on the roster.
But Cat was so perfect for this one matchup because he could make those offensive lineups functional, because he could work offensively at the 4. And, if you are talking about Gobert and another offensively limited player, then your offense becomes a real problem. Like, fly high 2024 Karl Anthony Towns against the Denver Nuggets. I do think that was, the best he's probably ever going to look in the playoffs, because he was just so important in this matchup, and it's weirder with him outside of it.
I'm just saying they don't have anybody who checks either box. Like, you could put Naz Reid out there, but Naz Reid is way too small to actually big body Jokic, right? So there's just no button they can press. And then beyond that, if we're talking about other little subtle keys for Minnesota, I think that unfortunately for them, and these guys have been excellent in their roles and since they've come along, I think Minnesota needs some offensive juice from some guys that I'm not super confident in delivering when it's playoff time, and that being less so Ayo Dosunmu. I've really liked Ayo in Minnesota. I think he is an excellent fit here. I think they need to keep him around long term. I think he's not like a true number one regular kind of point guard, but for what Minnesota wants to do, and the ball is going to be in Anthony Edwards' hands so often, right? He's your de facto lead ball handler. A guy like Ayo really fits well. He's a good decision maker. He's a good ball handler. He can run your offense at points. He's a great shooter, and he's a competent defender. And so it's less about Ayo, and it's more so that, they would need some juice from Bones, who I'm not super confident in. Speaking of revenge games, man, Bones could be looking for vengeance against his old team in Denver, but that's another thing, right? I feel like those guys, and I could include Randall and Naz in this as well, because Anthony Edwards is dealing with the runner's knee and the right knee inflammation too. Now, when I just look at this in totality for Minnesota, I get less and less confident the more and more I think about the matchup, because now I think you have less answers for an all-time great offense on defense. Your star players injured offensively, which brings into question about everything else that you're going to do. And now your offense has to match that all-time offense, and you're stressing out the other guys on your team where you're going to need more from Randall, and this is a tough matchup. You're going to need more from a guy like Ayo. You're going to need juice from Bones, and I don't know, man. I don't see it. And unless Ant, it's just going to require Ant coming into this series, being 100%, being excellent. And even if he is, I don't know if that's going to be enough to beat Denver. I can see it if Ant's at 100%. I'm not at all confident that he's going to come in and be at the level he needs to be to win this series. I think Minnesota has the dogs because they have an Anthony Edwards, but I don't think Anthony Edwards is going to be 100% in this series. And that question mark alone is enough for me to doubt Minnesota enough to think that Denver's going to win this one in less than 7.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about Ant's knee as you are. I don't think it's nothing, but I do think he has had a lot of time to rest it recently. He did come back in that Rockets game. I thought they were just going to shut him down for the regular season after he left the Sixers game, because I was like, why even bring him back? And I do think it speaks to some comfort, like the fact that he was willing to come back in a game that was really meaningless for them. So, again, he's had a lot of time off. Obviously, this has been sort of a lingering thing. He had a little bit of hamstring tightness in there too. Maybe he's not 100%, but he's got another 5 days from now to rest up. He's only played 3 games out of the last, 15, close to it. So I think he should be pretty good to go. Health is a factor for both these teams, obviously, because McDaniels has just gotten back and healthy. We don't know the exact status of Peyton Watson, Spencer Jones, who are relatively important depth guys for Denver, especially Peyton Watson, because if he is back again, I think he's a super, super valuable option to have if the Christian Brown experience isn't going well offensively, if he is struggling to make perimeter shots. And so we're just going to have to see with all that stuff. But when I look to some of the other keys in this matchup, I do think Julius Randle is very important. I think so much of what went right for the Timberwolves in the playoffs last year was about Randle being at his best and playing under control and making good decisions and being an efficient mismatch attacker and making his jumpers. And I'm still not the most confident necessarily in him consistently replicating that. It's been a rough three-point shooting season for him. And I also think Aaron Gordon is a really tough matchup for him where, like, he can't play bully ball against him. He's not walking into that matchup with an advantage as he does against a lot of forwards in this league. Now, obviously, there's always going to be the opportunity to hunt switches for Randle and whatnot. And if he can get a Christian Brown or a Jamal Murray on him or whatever, then he has opportunities to attack. And both he and Ant do have the advantage of, if they can create downhill pressure, there's not a lot of rim protection here in Denver. So they're probably either going to be able to get all the way to the rim and finish, or Denver's going to have to maybe overly aggressive help, right? Really sit in those gaps. And now you're talking about creating good catch and shoot opportunities for your teammates, and they have a lot of good shooters around them. So I do still think Minnesota's going to have a good offensive series because I just don't think Denver's defense is that good. But again, I think Denver's defense can do enough in a couple of these important ways to where the bar isn't that high for what they have to do defensively because their offense is that insane.
Whose bench do you like more in this series?
I think I like Denver's bench more. I mean, if we're presuming health, because Minnesota has Nas and they have Io, and those are two guys who can be game-changing players, especially Io. Both guys can go crazy offensively. I worry a bit more about the defense with Nas at the 5 minutes. But then it gets pretty sketchy after that. And they do hilariously have Slow-Mo on the team and Mike Conley on the team, guys who were pretty important in 2024 in this series, but they're not the players they were, especially Conley. And even though they did add Io and I loved it, Conley was so important for this team, and having just the guard depth that they did with both Conley and Nah, and just the experience and the defensive IQ of Conley and the playmaking offensively with the shooting, man, he was good for this team just a couple years ago, and now he can't play a single minute of playoff basketball. So I just think even though Minnesota has a couple potential high-impact guys, it gets skinny fast. I don't think that Bones can really play in this series against an offense as good as Denver's. I just think he is such an obvious target. And then I look at Denver on the flip side, and I'm like, if they're fully healthy, they've got THJ, who is this absolutely ridiculous volume three-point shooter. They've got Peyton Watson, who was coming into his own and averaging almost 20 points per game for a month while he can be a plus defender. They've got Spencer Jones, who is another solid plus defender, body that you can throw in the mix defensively, who was making a pretty high percentage of his threes this year. And it's just a solid, high-feel, kind of good role player. And then they've got Bruce Brown, what he can do in transition. He can be a defensive irritant. He can be a playmaker for you. Valanciunas as a solid backup center. I don't know how much he's going to play in this series. I think that'll be interesting. Denver went to the double big look for a couple minutes in this matchup earlier this year. I don't really anticipate them doing that again. Maybe they would do it, though, in the non-Gobert minutes to see if they can, really just crush on the glass. Could be interesting. Strother is a solid catch-and-shoot guy. I just think there's more good players here, and there's some players who bring them distinct value from one another, where I think there's just a few more options here. And I do think overall the non-Jokic and honestly the non-Gobert minutes, I think those are going to be a real deciding factor in this series. But are you with me? Do you like Denver's bench more?
I do. And it's kind of like you mentioned, I think I like the mix and match options that they have in terms of the distinct value. I don't think you're compromising as many certain things when you're looking at them in comparison to Minnesota's bench. And
yeah,
the Gobert thing's a big deal to me, man. Literally just the fact that Denver has a competent, playable backup center. And I was excited that the Timberwolves might turn to Baron J a little bit throughout the regular season. That didn't really ever come to fruition.
He did have 24, 12, and 7 blocks in their season finale. April regular season basketball, baby. We have seen some incredible stat lines. It's awesome. It's the worst, but it's awesome.
That guy for the Bulls, you see that guy?
Which
Lackland, some Australian gentleman that had a triple-double, 10, 15, and 10. Something ridiculous
incredible.
like that.
Incredible.
It's interesting to me that Minnesota didn't address that at the deadline, right? Like, I guess the button that they would press is we're just going to go to Nas, or maybe you'll get a little bit of Kyle Anderson burn there. But, like, I think the defense is going to be so catastrophically bad in the Minnesota bench minutes, and it's like Gobert can't possibly play, 40 plus. I mean, he could, but like he's not going to be out there all the time. Your defense is going to be compromised at some point. And so, yeah, I think Minnesota has just given up enough ground in that department for me to favor Denver.
I think so too. It's tough. It's like what we were talking about with Tyler, where they just can't reach the same heights of two-way excellence in any one lineup that like the very best of the best teams do, because Gobert is always going to make things a little tricky for your offense. But when Gobert's off the floor, now your defense becomes a big problem. Like they've got a 118 defensive rating in the Nas non-Gobert minutes this year. So I just think that's a challenge to try to win those minutes. And overall, like the Wolves have won the Gobert minutes versus Denver over these last couple years, but I think the Nuggets have more of an ability to win or at least hang even in the non-Jokic minutes now, because like they've been pretty good in minutes with Murray and Gordon on and Jokic off. And I wonder if like we see a little bit of Aaron Gordon at the 5 potentially if they don't want to pay Valanciunas, and maybe you get bullied by the Nas Randall front court in those minutes, but I think they could be lethal offensively with AG at the 5 and Murray running point and just whatever combination of guys in between them. And I don't know, like I think if you put AG on Randall in those minutes, like Nas isn't really going to bully Peyton Watson or a Spencer Jones as his primary matchup. I don't think. He's not a very good offensive rebounder for a big, and obviously just like loves playing from the perimeter more so. So there's just some talent here and some depth with Denver that is different this time around. And I do think that that's a meaningful difference maker for them. I also think the transition battle could be interesting in this series because neither of these teams are very good transition defenses. Denver's just not that athletic, and for Minnesota, there are times when like Ant and Randall are pretty lethargic about getting back. So I think whoever can cash in on sort of more easy points there, that could be a difference. And then I do think you look at the clutch games, and that's going to be a huge factor here because even though it definitely seems like we're both leaning Denver in this one, like I don't want to just brush off the fact that like so many of these games have been so closely contested over the last couple of years. This has been an epic rivalry because like these two teams are pretty damn evenly matched. And even if Denver's improved in some ways and Denver's been playing the better basketball as of late, like I still think crunch time is going to be a really big swing factor here. And I do lean on the side of Denver there. Like they had some issues in the clutch this year because their clutch defense was bad, but they are still a top 5 clutch offense. The Murray-Jokic two-man game is the best bet in the clutch that there is. They never turn the ball over. They've got so much shooting now. Minnesota is the number 19 clutch offense. And outside of Ant, like, there's a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily trust in terms of their late game operations. And also sometimes Ant, you can get to kind of force the issue as a scorer, and like he's not necessarily the best clutch decision maker. So I do think if it comes down to the close games, I like Denver a little bit more in those.
I do too, just because I like their offense on a possession-to-possession basis more. And, I mean, they've just looked way better than Minnesota in the back half of this season. That being said, I do want to be clear about something. Again, a lot of my skepticism about this going the distance is due to the fact that I'm not 100% sure about Ant being healthy. If we go game 1 and Ant looks like himself, I'll be clear about this too. I'm going to take Denver regardless. I think they're the better team. I think they have a historically great offense. I think they have the best player in this series. I think they're better than they've ever been before in this matchup.
Yeah.
If Ant is 100% after game 1, I will take this to go 7. I'm going to take Denver regardless, but if Ant looks like himself, I still think this is a problematic matchup for the Denver defense and their point of attack guys against Ant.
I agree. And like recent form, absolutely, Denver's been kicking ass. They've won 11 straight. And like a huge part of that is just having Aaron Gordon on the floor, right? And like we talked about the difference that makes defensively, the difference that his shooting makes, but also like he has just been such a great player for them, such a great playoff player. Like he's been such an awesome offensive rebounder for them in the playoffs, which is weird because like he's not that insane at it in the regular season. And then you get in the playoffs and he just gobbles up like 3 offensive rebounds a game. And then you have the mismatch attacking, the transition scoring, the passing field that he does have. He's just so awesome in like so many different ways. And Denver's a plus 14 net team with him. The offense is astronomically good in those minutes. The defense is actually good with Gordon on the floor. They're a plus 20 net team when he and Jokic play together. They're 20-6 in the games they play together, and that includes 9 straight wins to end the season. So I do just think Denver's the better team in better form right now. Minnesota obviously dealing with injuries, but they're 10-10 in their last 20 games. Ant missed more than half of that, but 22nd in offensive rating over that stretch, and like they ended up finishing the year 13th in offensive rating. So I do think, like, again, they have the potential to be very good offensively in this series, but I'm going to go Nuggets in 6. I would like put the line at Nuggets in 6.5. Like, I very much considered 7 because I do still think Ant is scary. The downhill power and force of this team against a Denver interior defense, Jokic's lackluster rim protection, that's an advantage. And they have the shooting of Dante, who's a weapon. And Jaden McDaniels has had the best offensive season of his career. And then you have like Nas and Ayo off the bench and they're shooting. So like, I want to be clear. I think this is going to be a really, really close, awesome series. I just think I have to bank on this Nuggets offense right now. I think they have the answers, and I think they can sort of turn enough dials defensively to where they're just the better bet to win this series.
I'm aligned with you. I'm going to take Denver in 6, and like I just said, it's going to hinge on Ant's health. I'll go Nuggets in 7 if he looks like himself after game 1, regardless, because he is that much of a difference maker to me, but yeah, Denver in 6 feels just about right.
Okay, let's move on to a much less sexy on paper matchup in the West that is much more impacted by injuries.
Definitely.
Because we've got the 4-seed Lakers hosting the 5-seed Rockets, but the Lakers definitely don't feel like a 4-seed if they don't have Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves, Logan. So I think we just have to start with that big key. Are those guys going to return? Are they going to return soon enough for it to make a difference? How do you factor all that into your prediction for this series?
I'll be honest with you guys. I am going under the assumption that these guys probably aren't going to play, just considering the timing and severity of these injuries. Luka has a grade 2 hamstring strain, as we mentioned on the show last week. He's going to Spain to get that looked at to see if he can maybe expedite the process
Getting
a little bit.
Stem cells injected.
I mean, dude.
They need a superhero.
Whatever they can do, man. Get a I was gonna say voodoo magic, but that don't sound right. That sounds kind of negative. Like
no, get it blessed. Get it blessed by some sort of high priest.
You need a wizard or a warlock of some sort to hook Luka up. Like,
yes.
Basically, what I'm saying is he's gonna have to go on a quest, a very important one, to get that hamstring back to full health in time. Same for Reeves. Reeves has got a grade 2 oblique strain. Like, it sucks, man, because like if they had gotten injured a month previous, both of these guys would probably be available, or at least close enough, 85, 90%, where they can go, all right, I can give you 4 or 5 games. I can be here for the beginning of this series. So I am operating under the assumption that these guys aren't going to play, but at minimum, they are definitely not going to be back, I think, for the beginning of this series. And that's most important. And so then you just get into a question of what gimmicks do the Lakers employ?
Yeah.
I'll let you, I mean, if you have anything on Luka or Reeves, let's get that off the top. But I basically think that's what it boils down to, is if Luka and Reeves aren't going to play, and I don't expect them to, then we get into a completely theoretical universe where it's like, all right, what buttons do they press? What coverages? What can the Lakers do desperately to make this an even competitive series?
Yeah, it's pretty dark, man. It really, really sucks for the Lakers. And like you said, I mean, you're looking at like a typical sort of month-long return timeline for both guys' injuries, and they both sustained those injuries on April 2nd. So it's basically like 15 days until the playoffs start. Pretty shitty. I definitely agree with you that neither of them are going to be ready to start the series. So I think the angle optimistically for a Reeves-Luka comeback in this first-round series is they come back after maybe 3-4 games, and the Lakers have to steal one early. Because if the Lakers can steal one early, and let's say that they're just down 1-2, and Luka, Reeves, both, one of them, whatever, feel like, okay, I'm 80%, I want to make the push, I want to play, then you can justify them getting back out there. But if you're down 3-0, I don't think we're going to see either of these guys because at that point it's just not worth the risk of aggravating the injury when you know that the series is already pretty much over and you're not going to be 100%. So I do think the Lakers need to steal one early in this series to buy those guys a little bit of time, and that is possible because it's always possible that you can win a game. You never know. But the roster without them is just brutal, and it's like the optimistic angle is, okay, they win one game to buy these guys enough time to come back, and then they still have to, like, claw them back from a deficit in the series when they're still, like, not fully recovered. And I just think it's a really unfortunate situation for the Lakers, and it's pretty tough to see a good outcome for them because we know essentially that for at least a chunk of this series, we're talking about a team of LeBron, Ayton, Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, Rui Hachimura, Jackson Hayes, and Vando. Like, that team wouldn't make the play-in. So, yeah, there's some pretty big things for the Lakers to try to figure out. Who do you even start? Like, what do you think their starting five is in this series?
Fuck. Ayton, Hotch, Kennard, Marcus Smart. Fucking LaRavia, man.
Hold on, you're not even starting LeBron.
Oh, LeBron.
You
yeah.
just benched LeBron.
Actually, give me LaRavia off the bench. Yeah,
I think they got to start LaRavia. LaRavia is their Swiss Army knife wingman. I think they got to start him. I think it's going to be Kennard, Smart, LaRavia, Braun, Ayton. Because I think that...
I'm starting Hotch.
Why? All due respect.
I hate LaRavia, man. He's slow and white.
Bro... Racist. LaRavia's better than Hotch. Hotch can stand there and spray open catch and shoot threes, and like that's something.
Game,
but
man. I just like how Hotch gets buckets, man.
He's got a clean shot, but he's a terrible passer, and then he's like the worst rebounder you've ever seen, and he's a bad defender. I'm pretty much off the Hotch, man. I think they want Kennard's offense
he's the
out
best
there.
Mid-range shooter in basketball this year. True story.
Yeah, he's a bucket. And yet he sucks. So that's the reality with the Hotch. I think regardless, I mean, if you're debating the Hotch versus LaRavia versus Kennard or whatever, like you're just in a bad spot. So you talk about some of the gimmicks they're going to have to pull. Like, what does that look like? What is the angle for the Lakers in this series?
Full extreme. We are going extreme in literally every avenue. There's not like they are so desperate. We're pulling out all the stops. We're throwing the kitchen sink at Houston if I am the Los Angeles Lakers. So there's a couple of things that are just unalienable and true. They are going to get overwhelmed physically by Houston. Houston has the length and strength basically across all matchups. Advantage Houston.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, what are the things that you can bank on in this series? Houston's rebounding. Number one in rebounds per game, number one in offensive rebounds per game, obviously without Steven Adams, but even head-to-head in this matchup, Los Angeles got out-rebounded by 13 rebounds per game. Los Angeles won this battle head-to-head in the regular season. Obviously, that's with Luka Doncic being available. But they did win this 2-1 despite being out-rebounded by over 13 boards per game in the regular season. But Houston is obviously flawed. They're 24th in turnovers per game, and they're 25th in three-pointers made and 28th in three-pointers attempted. So I think what you saw them do head-to-head against Houston in their last matchup, they won 2 games in basically the span of a week against Houston. Sell out on KD. You send some creative double teams at him against non-shooters. I think you try to force him into making some mistakes. He got a little bit overwhelmed by it in their last time they played, and so it's one of the things we talk about with this team. They don't have a lead point guard, so in certain matchups, you can try to induce them into forcing some turnovers. So swarm at KD when the opportunity presents itself. If he's on one of the wings, if he's near a baseline, use that to your advantage. Try to force him to force up some turnovers, get into his handle, get into his body. You want to force Houston into some of their bad tendencies, and you're going to have to make up some of the possession battle because you're going to lose it on the glass. You have to make it up in other ways. Turnovers are number one. The next thing, interrelated with that, and this is, they go hand in hand, sag off of non-shooters. Houston has got a lot of non-shooters that they're going to play in some of their lineups. If it's Eason, if it's a Kogi, man, if it's Amen Thompson, Sengun, sag off of them and see if you can play up on the ball handler, whoever's got the rock in their hands, and see if you can create some extra possessions that way. Again, This is a good cutting team, and they know how to operate when defenses load up, so you're going to obviously have to, rotate and play off the back end, but force Houston to pay for playing non-shooters and load up your defense in that way. I'm okay with conceding open three-point shots to bad shooters. Again, you're going to lose the possession battle. You're going to have to make up for it in other ways. And then with that, and this it maybe should be number one, the Lakers have to protect the basketball. If the Lakers are careless with the ball in the ways they normally are during the regular season, they're going to get swept. They're going to lose this thing very quickly in 4 or 5 games. They cannot turn the ball over the way they did during the regular season. And Houston's very good at forcing turnovers, too. And, again, they've got the length and strength advantage. You can't, again, they're going to get out-rebounded in a big way. You cannot give Houston extra possessions because you're going to get bludgeoned and maybe boat raced. And these are all to make games competitive, man. Like, they're going to have to do all this just to make games close. I don't know. I look at the biggest superpower in this series, and it's Houston's defense and then their ability to dominate the glass. And then the next thing that I think you can bank on mostly is KD's pull-up jump shooting. And outside of that, I don't know, man. I don't know what you do if you're the Lakers offensively, because it's basically going to be putting the ball in LeBron's hands and praying to the basketball gods that he can turn back the clock a little bit, which I think is problematic in this matchup with their length and size and strength. Yeah. The Lakers are just going to have to get gimmicky and try to hope that the Rockets have their worst tendencies on display early on in this series, and even that, I don't think is going to be enough.
Yeah, but when you talk about gimmicks, like, the Lakers really improved this year defensively when they just started playing a shit ton of zone. And they are a very good zone defense, and they turn to it more than like any other team in the league outside of Miami. So I think that is particularly good when you're facing a Rockets team that, because of like their major shooting issues, they face zone as much as any team in the NBA, and they've only been a 14th percentile offense versus zone. So I do think that's good for the Lakers. Just the fact that they have this ability to guard space and at times to bunch things up. And again, just like dare dudes to make perimeter shots for Houston. And like you said, they've also been able to give KD some trouble by doubling and trapping him a lot. So the one thing the Lakers can do defensively is play connected and play that zone and just do their responsibilities within that scheme. And not having Luka and Reeves could actually help them a bit on that end. That being said, it's not like they have defensive studs who can step in to fill those minutes. It's going to be like Luke Kennard and Rui Hachimura playing more, and like those guys are bad defenders too. You can't play Vando because he's the worst offensive player in the history of basketball, although they're going to have to play Vando at some point in this series because they've got to find enough warm bodies to play, Logan. They signed Nick Smith Jr. That's the big news in Laker Town. Like, I think the zone is something for them, but it almost feels pointless to like try to find the pass for the Lakers because it's like if Austin Reeves and Luka are out, you're obviously so cooked. But if the goal is to survive, if the goal is to get one of those first 3 games or whatever and buy those guys time to come back, like I don't think it's impossible. But there is so much on LeBron's plate offensively. And we've seen LeBron ramp up the volume in the non-Luka minutes this year per 75 possessions. In those minutes, he averages 26, 10, and 8 on 56% true shooting with 4+ turnovers. So he can give you the volume, but the efficiency really suffers. The team offense has been okay in those minutes. In full games without Luka, he's giving you 22, 7, and 10 on 56% true shooting. So we just haven't seen LeBron be able to really flip that switch at any point this year and just take over games offensively as like a number one option. I think for him to be effective in this series, the first thing you look at obviously is the jump shot because he's become so much more reliant on that in recent years. And for the last couple seasons before this one, like it was really effective. He's having a down jump shooting season. It's been the case all year. 40% from the mid-range, under 32% from 3. Just has to be better as a jump shooter in this series. And then you look at the post-up game, and that's where he's been so effective in recent seasons, also except for this year. And he's been a pretty inefficient post-up player this season. So those are a couple of things that he's just going to have to be better at in this matchup. That's the sort of old man offense where you can save the legs a little. You don't need to be super explosive. You need to be strong out of the post, and you need to make your shots from the perimeter. We'll see if he can do those things, but he's facing an awesome Houston defense and like a team that is just chock full of athletic wings. Amen, Jabari, KD, and Tari, who I think is the best LeBron defender on this roster. And like they can even mix in Okogie and DFS, who's never really found his role with this team, but maybe turns it around in the playoffs. I don't know. Like there's just so much length there, and there's so little help for LeBron offensively. Like the job is going to be he has to create so much. And then I think this team really just needs kind of lights out shooting around him. Like I think they need Kennard to be fantastic as a shooter. And like he's meaningfully changed the spot up shooting for this team. They need Marcus Smart to be on fire. They can't have him cold like he was for so much of this season. And honestly, so much of his career because he's Marcus Smart. He's not on average a very good 3-point shooter. And they do need Rui to like light you up in his minutes. They need LaRavia to make his shots. Like they just don't have creators outside of LeBron. The one thing that I do think LeBron can attack on this Houston defense is Şengün out of pick and roll. And I would actually probably lean on that more than the post-up game in this matchup because there's just not like many targets to post up and sort of bully.
In isolation or in space or just...
No, I'm talking about just putting him in pick and roll. And he's probably just going to have to sit and drop, and you're going to have to make some pull-up jumpers accordingly. But also, Ayton's actually like a pretty good pick-and-roll finishing big. Like maybe you can fit a couple lobs over top. You get him with a little pocket pass, and his floater game is actually pretty good. And regardless, Şengün is the weak link of this defense. He's not good guarding in space. He's undersized, and so like you just have an ability to attack him physically. I think LeBron can go through him as a driver if he gets ahead of steam coming downhill, and so wherever you can find that little vulnerability in this defense, if it's Şengün out of pick and roll, if it's Reed Shepherd, when he's on the court, like LeBron's got to be doing everything he can to get that switch so we can attack him out of the post. Those are the couple opportunities, but I just think it's too much to ask. Like with no creators alongside him, he's 41 years old. He hasn't played like a top 20 player this season, and Houston's defense rocks, and like they barely have weak links. If you just go through and you just look at the talent on these teams, if you draft the top 7 players in this series, 6 of them might be Rockets, like truly. Obviously, out of the top 4, it's like KD, LeBron, Şengün, Amen, and then Jabari and Reed and Tari might be the 3 next best players in this series. Tari, a lot of it depends on the shot, but versus DeAndre Ayton or Luke Kennard or Marcus Smart, like I just think even the role players for Houston are substantially better.
LA created the all 2026 one-dimensional team with their squad, man. They've got a lot of guys.
They said we're going to be all offense, and then they lost 2 of their 3 awesome offensive players.
They said we're going to have everybody on our roster. They can all do one thing really, really well, but nothing
They do have a lot of specialists with glaring weaknesses, and that's not a good thing to have in the big 2026.
That's a great take. The other problematic thing to me, Carson, is even if best case scenario for LA, steal a game, steal 2 games. Let's go full
steal
LA
3 games, steal 4 games. Now
scenario.
you won the series. Pretty good. That's the dream scenario.
If you get Luka back, there's a chance. There's always a chance with Luka, right? And that's number one. If Reeves comes back, I don't know how much Reeves makes a difference to me just because of how much he struggled in this matchup in the regular season. You know, in the regular season, Reeves gave you 14, 2, and 5 on 40% from the field, 19% from deep, and under 52% true shooting. He normally drew the Amen Thompson matchup, and like that's where you think about Reeves, what he's going to do moving forward. One, I think this is a horrible matchup for him.
Yeah.
And just his perception, his value, and we talked about a lot of this during the regular season. Great regular season hooper, normally great, over the course of a regular season, but this is like a nightmare kind of matchup for a guy like Reeves, and one where even if he did come back healthy I think he gets utterly overwhelmed in.
Yeah, if you've got an army of like super athletic wing defenders to throw at Austin Reeves, it's going to be a problem, especially if he's banged up and so he loses a little bit of burst and he had like no margin to give up on that front. If you can just switch and throw a bunch of good defenders at him, I think it tends to get very difficult for Austin Reeves, and there can be turnover problems. So, yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's so much more important that they can get Luka back for this series. But again, like, either one of those guys coming back, you're just sort of crossing your fingers and praying. Like, we don't know, but it seems unlikely, at least until deep into the series. So I'm low on Houston. I didn't even have them in my top 10 contenders, but I just don't see the talent for the Lakers to pull this off. Like, they would need a LeBron masterclass, and LeBron hasn't been delivering at that level this year. They need great spot-up shooting, and that's been an inconsistency for this team. They need good connected team defense when their personnel is limited on that side of the ball, like very limited athletically. Plus, they would just need a Rockets meltdown. They probably need KD sending some DMs. They need some terrible vibes. They need everybody absolutely shitting themselves as jump shooters. And it's like, you need a Şengün touch disaster class. Like, the Rockets' offense is very flawed, and they played a lot of mediocre basketball in the second half of this season in their own right, but they're just so much more talented, and like the size athleticism difference is so massive, and the offensive rebounding edge is so massive, and like, you're just fighting an uphill battle to not get obliterated on the offensive glass and not get obliterated in transition by Amen Thompson and not just get eaten alive by this team that's so much more athletic than you and so much more talented than you. So I just have doubts about like everything working out perfectly. They would have to go perfectly for LA for this to be a real series. I'm going to take the Rockets in 5. I honestly think they probably don't buy enough time. They probably don't buy enough hope to see Luka or Reeves or both come back, and this just ends up being like a really shitty series and unfortunate because we'll never know what the Lakers could have maybe done in this matchup if they were healthy.
Yeah, I'm going to take Houston in 5, but I'm much closer to Houston sweeping.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like the Lakers get 1 just because I don't think the Rockets are a good enough basketball team to really sweep. Like, I think there's going to be an ugly enough offensive game. And, again, if you can get 1, maybe you leave that little sliver of a door open, but it's a tough situation for the Lakers overall.
That would rock. I don't know. I'm just kind of down for whatever in this series because I'm not emotionally invested into either of these teams.
It would be amazing to see Luka come back. I think the Lakers, even though I've been low on them all year and all the flaws they have, like at full strength, are a little better than the Rockets because at least the half-court offense can be awesome with them. Both these teams are deeply flawed. I don't think either one of them is as good as like a Minnesota or whatever, but somebody's got to win this series, Logan. So that's the way it works out. Okay, let's go to the Eastern Conference. We've got the Knicks versus the Hawks in the 3-6 matchup, Logan. This one was determined on the final day when the Hawks lost. What do you make of this matchup? Like, what's the first key that stands out to you here?
Racking my brain for this, man. I just really struggle to see, and I just don't know if I'm not seeing it. I know Atlanta's been playing great basketball. I just really fail to see any advantage for them.
Interesting. Wow.
I don't know. Like, I just don't know what they do with Jalen Brunson. Like, I hate Atlanta's bench. I think Atlanta maybe has one of the worst. Well, I would say they have one of the worst benches in the playoff field. The Lakers do exist. That is true.
Yeah, but it's not even a real bench. It's like we already had a bad bench, and then we lost 2 of our 3 best players. Yeah.
My thing is, like, I asked them 2 questions, and it's basically about the Knicks stars on both ends of the court. Offensively, I go, who can really limit and slow down Jalen Brunson? And I'm like, I mean, Nikola can do a decent job, I think, on him head-to-head, but I think Brunson's going to get his.
What about Dyson Daniels? What is this Dyson Daniels erasure? How many better options are there to throw at Brunson than Dyson Daniels?
I think Brunson's strength is going to win out over the – I mean, like, they're really
Dyson's
good.
Long, man.
Brunson's as consistent as they come. I just think he's still one of the best offensive players on the planet, even though he hasn't been great.
I just feel like you're downplaying how good an option Dyson is to throw at him. It's not that, oh, yeah, Dyson's going to convincingly win that matchup. It's like if you were drafting players to defend Jalen Brunson, I don't think you go more than like 5 or 6 names before you get to Dyson Daniels. So, like, of all of the teams that could, like, be asked to guard Brunson, they do have a very good man individually to do it.
Yeah, I just wish Dyson was a little bit, thicker in that matchup. Like, I think that would.
You love him thick. You always have.
I wish he was a little bit sturdy because that's my thing. I go offensively for the Knicks, and I say Brunson builds them in such a high offensive floor game to game. He's been one of the best playoff performers on the planet over the past few seasons. So I know what I'm getting with him. And then defensively, when I look at the Knicks, I do think they're exploitable, right? They've been a great defense all year long, top 10. And you can bring Brunson and Cat into the action. I just think it would take like a nuclear Nickeil Alexander-Walker offensive performance, which I can't rule out. Like, I know the Hawks have been playing great basketball. They're one of the hottest teams on the planet post-All-Star break, but I think the Knicks have better continuity. I think they're way more talented. I don't know, man. I'm leaning, even though I've been critical of the Knicks all season long, I'm leaning very much heavily on the Knicks side in this series.
I really disagree. I actually think this is an upset watch situation. And it's interesting because initially I was thinking that we were going to get Cavs-Hawks in the 4-5 just because the Hawks were sitting in the 5 seed. And I was sort of thinking through that matchup, and I thought there were a lot of flaws the Hawks had that the Cavs could pretty easily exploit and kind of breeze through the series, honestly. But I don't feel that way about the Knicks at all, really. I actually think this is a pretty scary series for them. And the Hawks did end the season in really good form. They won 20 of their last 25 games before they lost that pretty meaningless season finale when they sat everybody. They were 8th in offensive rating and 2nd in defensive rating post-All-Star break. I was never the most bought into them because of some of these concerns that I have, like particularly about their offense. But I don't think that the Knicks are a defense that can really take advantage of some of their offensive flaws. So we can start with the other side of the ball. We can start with the Brunson matchup. Like, it's a given. Brunson is always an absolute handful, right? He is always a problem to deal with. He is always going to get his in terms of volume. But they do have Dyson Daniels, and nobody defended Brunson more than Dyson this year. Like, he's going to really, really stick in that matchup as much as possible. And he's a very good option to have in terms of a Brunson defender. He is a really, really good point of attack guy, and he does have the length to pose some issues for Brunson. Even if Brunson does have a strength advantage, Dyson has the height and the length advantage. And then in terms of how they're going to deal with Brunson out of pick and roll, it's very hard to play drop when Cat is being used as the screener because of what he can do, obviously, as a pick and pop guy. And so I think Onyeka is probably going to have to switch on to Brunson a fair bit because Onyeka isn't like a good drop big anyways. He's not a really good rim protector. His defensive value is more so predicated on his ability to guard in space. Maybe they also try putting Jalen Johnson on Cat at times and having him switch that. But regardless, like Onyeka, Jalen Johnson, those guys are decent guarding in space. That's still clear advantage Brunson if he gets those guys on an island with room to work as a scorer. So I think what Atlanta's going to have to do is probably throw some doubles and some blitzes at Brunson and just show him different stuff all around. Like, keep him from finding that comfort zone as a scorer. If he gets out of the Dyson matchup, pretty much force him to give up the basketball. And that's not an ideal thing to have to do defensively ever, but like, you don't want Brunson just, again, getting in that rhythm as a scorer. You want to make him beat you as a playmaker, as a passer. And so I don't think that the Hawks are hopeless in that matchup. Like, engaged can hold his own defensively in the Brunson matchup. They have Dyson Daniels. They have some decently switchable guys. You seem much more pessimistic.
Well, then I'm thinking beyond that. Okay, let's go with that. Let's say they do a good job on Jalen Brunson. Then what the hell do they do with Cat? Like, I think this is a bad matchup for Atlanta. Like, I know that Cat can be inconsistent, but I look at their front court, and I don't, specifically Cat and Mitchell Robinson, I look at his problems for Atlanta in this matchup, where on the interior, Onyeka is not a big body. Jock Landale is not a big body. Like, I think they get kind of bitched on the glass a little bit. And I know they have aggregate rebounding, right, with Jalen and big bodies like N.A. but like Cat, I think, can physically overwhelm their front court in the post, and I think he's going to be able to stretch the floor. I don't know. I just don't. I would take, if I was taking offensive players in this series, or actually, if I'm just taking players in this series, I think Brunson and Cat are just the two guys I take off top immediately, and I don't know
don't
what
know.
Atlanta does to limit them. And I think Atlanta really gets worked on the glass in this series because of the limited personnel that they can turn to at the 5 spot.
I'm not as worried about Cat from Atlanta's perspective as you are, because I think if you get Cat into a position where like he's trying to assert himself out of the post, you're probably winning as a defense. Like, Cat's just not a very good post scorer. He's not that good as an isolation player, especially if he's dealing with a big who has the foot speed to keep up with him in space like Onyeka. Like, if you get Cat in the mode where he's trying to really impose himself one-on-one, again, that's where you get some of the out-of-control drives, and maybe he gathers too soon, and he just makes a lot of mistakes when he's doing that. So I'm always worried about his shooting threat. I'm not so much worried about Cat, like, bullying Onyeka or bullying even, like, a Jalen Johnson, because he just doesn't really do that. He's not very good at that.
Well, I mean, it's partly due to the fact that I do think Cat has a physicality advantage, but it's more so due to the fact that, like, what's stopping him from just shooting over the top of any defender that Atlanta puts on him? They're not tall enough to really bother his shot. Like, I just think Cat is I think Cat is a mismatch in this series. I don't really like any of the, and like Brunson, like I agree with you. When we're looking at the difference between them, I think they have more guys that they can throw at Brunson, but I think Brunson is just normally impervious to matchups and can kind of get his regardless of the elite defender you put him on. And then when I look at the Cat one, it's more so due to the fact I don't really think there's anybody on Atlanta's roster that I like matching up individually with Cat, period.
Yeah, I just don't think I'm as worried about that as you are. Like, again, you're basically saying Brunson and Cat are two very good offensive players, and I agree with that, but I don't see anything in this matchup where I'm like, ooh, that's bad for Atlanta, you know? Whereas I look at the other side of the ball, and I do see some stuff for the Knicks defense where I'm like, ooh, that's pretty bad for them.
I want to hear about that, but the straight up just two-man game.
I think that's always a challenge.
I think that just tips the balance way in favor of the Knicks.
I think it's going to be telling to see how they approach that defensively. I do think they're going to do a lot of switching, and I do think that might force them into some sort of late doubles and, again, doing what they can to get the ball out of Brunson's hands. And it's like, look, I'm not trying to downplay the Knicks offense because the Knicks are a top 5 offense for a reason, and I don't think the Hawks defense is like nearly as good as them being second in defensive rating in this late stretch of the season would say. But I do think having Dyson to throw at Brunson is pretty good. And I do think having Nas, another option to deal with Brunson at times, is pretty good. And I do think that there is enough mobility on this Hawks defense and sort of aggregate size and length for them to hang in there on that side of the ball. I think what's really interesting to me is how the Hawks can exploit the Knicks' defensive issues, because I think what we have to address first is the Hawks' big offensive concern that like every single playoff coach is going to be figuring out, okay, how do we manipulate that? And that is Dyson Daniels offensively. Just because you're talking about an 18% three-point shooter as a guard, like I was thinking about this in reference to the Cavs matchup, and that's where I'm like, yeah, that's a big problem, right? Because you have Mobley roaming off of Dyson Daniels. We've seen that happen in the Cavs-Hawks matchup, and now you're talking about like a high-level rim protector who's parked in the paint, and that's very bad for the Hawks offense. If it's Cat roaming off of Dyson Daniels, it's just not as problematic. Like, you're still talking about a 7-footer who you can have parked in the paint. And maybe more significantly, the benefit of that is it keeps Cat from having to guard the pick and roll. It keeps him from having to worry about Onyeka as a popper or whatever, because it's like you can bring Dyson up to screen for the ball handler, but like Cat's just going to play drop. He's going to ignore Dyson, because once Dyson is above the break offensively, no disrespect, he's like a useless offensive player. He could get to that little floater off the short roll, but where I think he can actually like do some stuff offensively while he's being roamed off of is as a cutter. If the roamer falls asleep for a second, as an offensive rebounder, like that's what Dyson's good at. When he's playing above the break, I mean, just the complete lack of shooting makes him a guy that you can pretty much ignore if he's brought into the action as a screener. And so it's nice that like you can hide Cat in that way. That is a good thing, but it doesn't make him a disruptor like a lot of other bigs roaming off of Dyson would be disruptors. So because I don't think like Dyson is as problematic versus the Knicks as he would be in a lot of other matchups in terms of half-court offense, I still think it's a problem, but I just don't think the Knicks pose many issues for the Hawks offense, even though I'm not high on their offense. Like 14th in offensive rating, 15th in half-court offense. I've expressed some of my concerns about Jalen Johnson as a lead offensive option in the half-court. I just think this is a pretty favorable matchup for them because I think they can really attack Brunson on defense. Like, this is not an easy series to hide Brunson in my opinion. You could try putting him on Dyson, but then again, that leaves Cat very vulnerable. And so I think you probably have to put Brunson on CJ McCollum as like his primary matchup. And like, he might just get fried. Like, CJ can still get himself a bucket. CJ can shoot over top of a Brunson very comfortably. And so his matchup might be able to attack him. But I think what you really want to do if you're Atlanta is run a lot of CJ and Jalen Johnson pick and roll, probably mostly with Jalen as the ball handler. And then you just force Brunson to do what he's worst at defensively, which is guard, like inverted pick and roll specifically, but guard any sort of guard on guard screen, whatever. Like, he is either going to have to switch, and then I think he gets eaten alive, or he's going to do that little weak show that he does, and now you're talking about briefly putting 2 on the ball, and now you're effectively creating a 4-on-3 for the offense. Like, you just have an advantage every time if you bring Brunson into the action and force him to guard Jalen Johnson and CJ McCollum, and I think that's probably the path to crunch time offense for Atlanta is just like bleed Jalen Brunson, and I also don't think that the Knicks are a very good team to guard Jalen Johnson overall. Like, again, very different from how I was thinking about the Cavs matchup because I do have concerns about Jalen Johnson as a playoff offense number one. I have concerns about his handle. I don't think it's really up to that standard. I have concerns about his over-the-top shot making and being forced into more of those looks that he's like just okay at. Like, there's still some polishing that he needs to do, but although like OG would be a great option to put on Jalen Johnson, right? Because they had Cat on Dyson Daniels in their last meeting, and I imagine they'll probably do that again to hide Cat, that means you have to put OG on Onyeka because you need some sort of big body who can contend with Onyeka, which means they had to put Josh Hart on Jalen Johnson. And that's just not as intimidating a defender. Like, Hart can be annoying. He can maybe bother the handle a little bit, but like, there's a pretty big size and athleticism advantage for Jalen there, and he can see over top of him as a passer very easily, which I think is significant because that's where Jalen Johnson is at his best offensively, when he's creating plays for others. So I just don't really see like how they make Jalen Johnson as uncomfortable as a lot of other teams could. Like, OG can still be helpful as a helper with his size. Again, Cat, I imagine, is going to be in and around the paint a lot. He's Cat, he's a body, but he's not a very good rim protector. And then what I think is interesting is if OG or whoever is matched up with Onyeka tries to be aggressive helping on Jalen Johnson drives, like, the fact that Onyeka really can space the floor is meaningful because his three-point shooting becomes a big deal. He's over 39% from deep this season. He's been awesome from the corners. So if he can keep OG honest from helping on Jalen Johnson drives, like, that's a big deal because Cat's rim protection just isn't that imposing. And then it's like, if OG is aggressive helping, right? If they are kind of trying to pack the paint on Jalen Johnson, Jalen is at his best as a passer. So if he's consistently creating penetration and he's creating open threes for an Onyeka, like, pretty good offense.
What's stopping the Knicks from then just putting OG on Jalen if Josh Hart's getting fried in that matchup?
Now Josh Hart has to deal with Onyeka, who's like an awesome offensive rebounder.
Well, why wouldn't you just change who's sagging off you attach Cat to Onyeka like you don't have him slide, and you just tried to win one-on-one, and then you turn Josh Hart into the help guy off of Dyson. Or, you know, you just move the pieces around a little bit.
Well, you could do that, but now you have the ability to bring Cat into pick and roll every single time because now he's guarding Onyeka, who's like a very viable pick and roll finisher, pick and pop big.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they could win. I think they could win one-on-one. I don't
know, man. Like, the Knicks having 2 significant defensive weak points means there's a way to attack something all the time. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't find a solution where you're just hiding Cat and Brunson. Like, that doesn't exist.
The advantage that, and I agree with you. I mean, that's what I would do if I was Atlanta, too. I'd get Brunson in the action literally every single time. I would do that not only because he's a liability, but, 2, because I think over the course of a game and a series, I'm going to wear him down. I want him to work through every – I want him to get tired. I want to wear Jalen Brunson out. I want him to exert as much energy as he can defensively so he has less to exert offensively, and hopefully by the end of the series he's tired. Now, again, easier said than done. The advantage that I think Atlanta has is in transition, where
100%.
if they can get stops
I hadn't
on
even
the
gotten
Knicks,
there. I hadn't gotten that far on my list of advantages that Atlanta has, but absolutely.
That's the one area I don't. The reason I favor the Knicks is because of how easily I think they're going to get offense. That is why I am leaning on their side. Because when I look at Atlanta's side, I'm going to be honest. I like Jalen Johnson. He doesn't really scare me that much as a scorer. The guy that I'm worried about more so than anybody else is Nikola. And then, honestly, followed by that is probably CJ just getting blistering hot as like a pull-up shooter. Those are the guys that I'm worried most about killing me as scorers. And if Nikola goes nuclear, and I'm not writing that off, if Nikola's giving me 23-plus a night efficiently, I think Atlanta has a chance in this series. But, again, the other areas, I think Atlanta is going to have to win defensively, and then they're going to have to turn those points into offense at the other end, where you're talking about the Knicks being compromised schematically. And Cat's been better. I want to be clear about this. Cat has been better in transition this year, so I want to tip my cap to him. He's at least been trying harder. The 5 minutes where I'm talking about Atlanta is giving up size on the interior with Cat and Robinson in those lineups with Onyeka and Landale. While they have size and physicality and rebounding limitations, they do get that advantage back in terms of their transition offense, where if they can win defensively, I think Atlanta could exploit the fact that the Knicks like to play slow, that they have slower-footed, less agile bigs that aren't going to be able to get up the court as often, and Atlanta has just got a bunch of athletic, quick guys who can kill them in that regard. So that is where I actually do see advantages for Atlanta offensively.
I mean, that's a big advantage. Like, the Hawks have been one of the best transition offenses in the NBA. They have a plus 5.5 point per game transition margin. The Knicks are a very meh transition team. And even if you don't score on a fast break when you push, you can force cross matches. And now you've got Brunson guarding somebody he doesn't want to be guarding. You've got Cat guarding somebody he doesn't want to be guarding. Like, I think there's more advantages for Atlanta's offense than you're giving credit to, just because they have enough skilled players who can attack these two really, really bad defensive players. Like, Jalen Johnson, to me, is very valuable in this matchup because of his ability to put either Brunson or Cat in a bind. If it's calling up Brunson to guard any sort of screening action, and then he has this massive size athleticism advantage. If it is, okay, now they try to go to a more conventional look. They put Cat on Onyeka. Well, now you're going to force Cat, this terrible pick and roll defender, to guard that two-man game over and over again. Like, I don't think we're going to really see Jalen Johnson's flaws exposed in this series. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Josh Hart really can get up in his handle, like maybe his flaws just do come through, but I just don't think this is like the series where I'm like, ooh, Jalen Johnson, I don't know. And I could easily envision that series. It's just not what I'm envisioning from the Knicks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the counters. I'm trying to get up in his handle, and then I'm trying to run a drop where I'm not going to give him the lane to get to the rim, but enough drop to where maybe I could tempt him into taking that pull-up off the dribble three.
Yeah, but if you're playing drop, it's like, all right, if you're talking about guarding the Jalen Johnson-Onyeka two-man game, then it's like, Onyeka, the pick-and-pop three has been really good this year. Like, just get to that. It's a really good shot.
No, I'm saying the on-ball defender on Jalen is going to go under the screen, and the center is going to go back with Onyeka, and I'm going to concede the pull-up three.
Okay, so you're just talking about an under.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to give him wide-open pull-up threes.
I mean, I think it's that. I think I'm trying to test his handle, and I'm trying to tempt him into take. I'd rather that than have him get into the lane on me. I don't know. He just doesn't scare me as an offensive creator, even in this matchup. Like, I agree with you. I think his best tendency is the fact that he can create for his teammates, and he's so great in transition and all that. But in the half court, I don't think I'm too worried.
Interesting. I don't agree. And then you also have the fact that Nas on a straight heater. His last 20 games, he's averaging 24 a night on 71% true shooting, making 48% of his threes, and making almost 4 threes a game. Like, I actually do think they have a better formula to checking him in pick and roll, because they put Mikal on him, who was like a decent primary defender. And then if he brings OG or Hart into the action, they can switch that. He can always call up Cat or Brunson, but Cat can probably play drop if he's matched up with Dyson, right? Just because Dyson is such a non-threat, or maybe blitz that. And Brunson might be able to switch on to Nah without it being a disaster, because it's not like Jalen Johnson, who has this huge size athleticism advantage, and Nah isn't really an ISO scorer. So, like, That's why I do think that Jalen Johnson pick and roll is a little bit more problematic than Nah pick and roll when it comes to attacking those defensive weak links. But when it comes to like Brunson trying to switch on to Nah and Nah just in general, like he might just fry your face off shooting over top because he's been making ridiculous shots for like a month plus now, like movement threes, contested threes. He's gotten the mid-range going. And then the other thing with him is he does so much work in transition where he's awesome, and as a spot-up guy that like if he's shooting like this, you're just going to feel his threat everywhere. And so I do think the fact that he is in like such good form right now is pretty scary for the Knicks. And so, yeah, I just look at a lot of guys for Atlanta and I'm like, they can hurt you enough and they can attack your weak links. I think it's a pretty good matchup for them. But I do think there's some interesting things for the Knicks to figure out too, because I agree with you. I don't love the bench for either team, but I do think the Knicks have a couple more potential difference makers, whereas I don't really see that with the Hawks. So that's where I look at like Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson. Bench. Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. You know, you give away Vic Krejci and you're probably never going to come back from that. You give away Luke Kennard. Like, they've actually given away some guys who could have given them good playoff bench minutes this year. But where do you come down on like the Deuce McBride minutes versus Josh Hart, the Mitchell Robinson minutes, the double big minutes you mentioned? Like, how do you want to see the Knicks handle all those rotation decisions?
I definitely want a healthy helping a Deuce McBride. I want him to get some decent burn. I just think he's a good player. Mitch, I don't know. It's interesting, man, because both of these bigs, like Landale's not like an elite shooter or anything like that, but him and Onyeka can both space the floor a little bit, right? Like where I don't want – they could bleed some threes in those minutes. I definitely don't think I'm ever trying to run double big. I think that is something I would definitely avoid in this matchup. I think Atlanta could abuse. I don't know. You can look at it in two ways. Because if the Knicks are controlling the pace of the game, they could just eat on the glass in that matchup where I think Atlanta could get shit on. But they're also going to be incredibly, incredibly slow. And so I think I'm probably trying to avoid it at all costs because I think Atlanta probably bleeds more value in the double big lineup just because of how bad New York would be defending in space and in transition. And I think that that's not a counter. It's a valuable counter that you could employ in certain matchups, but I don't think it's one that the Knicks are going to need a ton in this one specifically. And then Deuce, I think, is going to be important. I just think he's a good basketball player. But I think Mitch is going to win his minutes enough just by dominating Atlanta on the glass. I mean, he's a special rebounder. I think he's one of the best in basketball. I just hate Atlanta's bench, legitimately. I don't like Kuminga. I think Corey Kispert fucking sucks, man. I can't lie. I think that guy just is – I don't know if he's a rotation player anymore. Hey. Gabe Vincent is actual booty. They're going to lose all of Gabe Vincent's minutes. Now, that guy stinks.
Mo Gay.
I like Mo Gay. I like Mo Gay a decent amount. I can't lie. I don't understand why they don't play Resache anymore. And, like, that's been – contested. I don't know why Kispert gets burned over a guy like Resache. Atlanta's bench blows. I think Atlanta just loses all of their bench minutes. I'm going to be honest. I think the
Jonathan Kuminga, Logan. Jonathan Kuminga is their best bench player. I do not like Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga is the one guy where it's like, okay, you could see him going on a little scoring explosion for a few minutes. What?
Oh, you just mean of any player on this bench?
Yeah. What do you think I was saying?
I don't know. I was just like, no, I actually can't. I guess I could. Maybe like a cool 3-possession run, sure.
I mean, look, man, if there's one thing Jonathan Kuminga's good for, it's a little 12-point quarter. It's a little, let me get this run out in transition. Let me grab and go. Let me shoot over top of a smaller guy. Let me bully one guy.
Well, yeah, it just sucks.
Like,
I
Jonathan
normally
Kuminga
hate
can
Kuminga
score
shot
the basketball one-on-one. Yeah, and I tend to agree. And I'm very low on Jonathan Kuminga. But I'm saying if you got to choose like one guy where it's like, he could have his moment in this series off the bench, it's probably Kuminga. I think on average, is he a positive? Probably not, but at least he's got some ability. And that's something for the Hawks bench. But I do think the Josh Hart versus Deuce McBride decision for New York is going to be really interesting because back-to-back years, they've just been way better statistically in the Deuce minutes. And we were talking a little bit with Tyler about like the weirdness of their starting five, like consistently losing those minutes. I think part of that is Brunson and Cat being so problematic defensively. Part of it is also like the weirdness of Josh Hart. I do like Deuce for the point of attack defense and the shooting and the ball handling, but I also like Josh Hart's offensive rebounding and connective passing and what he does in transition. And I think he's probably going to be important as a Jalen Johnson defender in this series, just as like, again, I think he's going to be the primary matchup because of what I'm expecting them to do with Cat on Dyson Daniels, which forces OG onto Onyeka. And so they need Josh Hart out there probably for that responsibility. And he always has like the looming concern of what if he just goes ice cold as a shooter, because there's the possibility that defenses just start roaming off, helping off of him, so you can dedicate more attention to Brunson.
I always have a double-edged sword with that, though, because Hart's one of those guys that normally makes up for it in his decision-making and his rebounding and the effort, but also with guys like that, it's complicated because he's not a good shooter, hence why Atlanta would leave him open. But also, that also means that sometimes if you do make the right decisions, you're just going to get an X amount of wide open, uncontested threes, which is an insane shot quality.
I agree. And like Josh Hart has actually shot the three well this year. He's 41% from deep. It's just you always know that there's some volatility there. But I think Josh does enough good stuff specifically in this series to where they probably ride him a little bit more than Deuce. Now, not in the way that they used to with Tibbs, where they would play Josh Hart like 36, 40 minutes, because like Josh Hart just isn't good enough to play that much. No disrespect. He has some magical moments, but like he just has some real flaws as a basketball player. But I think Deuce also, you look at it and it's like, that's another small guard who Jalen Johnson can potentially attack. And then maybe some of your advantage on the offensive glass diminishes a little bit in those minutes. So I think this is actually a series where Josh Hart is probably going to be relatively important. I still think Deuce should play a fair bit. I also think, though, Mitchell Robinson could be really important in this series because of what he can allow you to do defensively, where you can roam off of Dyson if their minutes overlap with an actual rim protector, because that's what Mitch is. And then you can also dominate on the offensive glass in his minutes. He obviously has his offensive flaws. Like the Knicks are just such a little weird team of drawbacks and positives and like good stuff and bad stuff. But he does open the door for teams blitzing the Brunson pick and roll, because now they're going to dare Mitch to beat them as a decision maker off the roll and just beat them as an offensive player. There's always the possibility of sending him to the line, and he has been horrific from the free throw line this season. So maybe Hacka Mitch gets him off the floor. But I do think when I look at like the defensive vulnerabilities the Knicks have, it gets a lot easier if you have Mitchell Robinson parked in the paint, roaming off of Dyson Daniels, and he's able to, again, really disrupt a lot of those drives for Atlanta in a way that Cat just can't. So I think the good thing for the Knicks is that they have options, even though you can see, again, the good and bad outcome with them trying a lot of these different things. Like over the course of a series, you're probably going to get one really good Mitch game. You're probably going to get a couple really good Hart games. And like, you're probably going to be able to find enough variety and enough of these like unique contributions from these different guys where you're getting more from your depth than Atlanta is. And then I do think also like it's worth noting that although we can talk about the Knicks offense as if it's like all about Brunson, obviously Cat is a very good offensive player. OG and Mikal are like pretty steady third and fourth options. This team is great on the margins. They don't turn the ball over a lot. They offensive rebound it very well. Like they are just flat out the better offense than Atlanta, like, and substantially so. So even if they have defensive vulnerabilities, I think Atlanta can attack. Like I trust Jalen Brunson offensively way more than any other player in this series. I trust the totality of the Knicks offense more than Atlanta's. And I think one area where that really comes in huge is in the clutch games, because the Knicks have been awesome in the clutch this year. They're third in clutch offensive rating. They're third in clutch net rating. And that's where Jalen Brunson is arguably at his very best, where he can just kind of walk you down out of pick and roll, out of isolation, and get himself to a good intermediate shot over and over again and like never turn the ball over and just be so consistent there. Whereas you look at the Hawks and it's like they're 17th in clutch offensive rating. They had a losing clutch record this year. And so I do think the close games definitely lean towards the Knicks. And that's why, with all the concerns I've expressed about New York, I am still going to take them to win in 7, because I think this is going to be a real battle of a series. And yet I just think, like, when it comes down to it, if it's crunch time in a game 5 or a game 7, like, I'm going to take the team that is Jalen Brunson on the floor.
Dude, I think this is the most we've ever disagreed on a single playoff
Logan has
series.
the Knicks in 3.
Yeah, I've got the Knicks in 3.5.
Wow.
I've got the Knicks in 5.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I think Atlanta's half-court offense leaves them hanging a couple of games. I agree with you. I think the Knicks win the tight games early on, and I just think Atlanta's offense sputters in a little bit of a way that the Knicks done. I mean, granted, I'm saying all of this. The last game these teams played not that long ago, it got decided by 3 points. So we could be in for a barn burner. That's very much on the table. I do trust the Knicks a lot more, and a lot of it just comes down to I think Brunson and Cat have been here. They've done that, and I think they're going to do it again.
I get it. I'm just such a Knicks defense pessimist. I think that being a top 8 defense is so fake.
I will admit,
really?
As critical as I've been about teams that I have had in this skepticism range, I've been very critical of the Lakers, the Sixers. The Knicks have very much been in this team that I'm impressed. I'm moved. I think Mike Brown is a much better coach, and just specifically in this matchup, I like the Knicks a lot more.
Interesting. We'll have to see. I'm going to have to see what a playoff defense with Cat and Brunson looks like to be moved, because I still have a lot of the same concerns as ever. But I also do have concerns about the Hawks offense, and don't have a ton of faith in any of their leading offensive options. But then again, I do see the weak points that they can go at where this could be sort of an easier matchup for them. So that's where I can see the Hawks pulling off the upset, because I think the Knicks defense is weak, and because I do think just athletically what they can do in transition, they might build themselves some real margin, especially because the Knicks are a team that doesn't get out in transition that much on the other end. But I think the clutch factor is why I ultimately feel pretty comfortable picking the Knicks. I think it really is just that gut check. Give me the team with Jalen Brunson. Give me that ability to dictate those late games, where I am going to lean on New York, and I'm closer to Knicks in 6 than I am picking the Hawks upset. But if the Hawks do pull off the upset, I won't be shocked by that outcome. Let's get to the last series that is set in stone, Logan, the 4 versus 5 matchup in the East, Cavs-Raptors. We haven't seen this matchup since November, and the Raptors actually went 3-0 against the Cavs, but all super early in the season. Cavs were significantly shorthanded in all of them. It's obviously long before the Harden trade even happened, so we really don't have much to work off of here. So given that we're almost starting from scratch in this matchup, what's the first key that really stands out to you here?
Yeah, the regular season matchups between these teams are so strange because, like you mentioned, they were so long ago, and you go back and you watch games between these two teams, and you've got DeAndre Hunter still playing big minutes for the Cavs. You've got Lonzo Ball still out there a lot. It's
kind of
really
interesting.
Write
it off.
Yeah. And that is kind of the big question to me is just, can this Raptors defense slow down the new look Cavs offense? I mean, the Cavs have been elite, 19-6 with James Harden in the rotation. They have a 126.5 offensive rating with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell on the court this year. You've mentioned this a bunch, too. Harden has just made a guy like Jared Allen so much better. 4 more points per game with him this season. He's already stupid efficient, but 6% higher. True shooting percentage. That's basically my first question. I mean, the Raptors' defense has been great, but do they have the abundance of personnel to limit this elite Cleveland offensive attack? And I don't know. There are some areas in which I think the Toronto defense can certainly hang. I think on the glass they're going to do battle with them. I know Toronto wasn't a great rebounding team in the regular season, but with Pirtle, with Barnes, with the aggregate size and length that this team has throughout the roster, I think it's about a wash on the glass. But physically, I don't know, man. It's just a problem. Donovan Mitchell, I just don't think is getting held by any of the perimeter defenders on this roster. I like Quickly. Shout out a guy like Jamal Shed off the bench, man. If Donovan Mitchell is raining pull-up threes, you're cooked. I also just think he's going to get to the basket. It will. I look at Harden and Donovan Mitchell as particularly problematic because I think their best defender is obviously a guy like Scotty Barnes, but Are you compromising your defense by moving him off of a guy like Evan Mobley for a different matchup? What the hell do you do with Brandon Ingram? He's not a plus defender. Like, I think Toronto has a good defense. In most matchups, they have looks that they can turn to. But specifically against Cleveland, when you've got two really high-level play finishers like Allen and Mobley, Mobley is just kind of a problem in of himself because of his combination of skill and length. And then James Harden and Donovan Mitchell are just guys that are hard to game plan for when you don't have an elite point of attack kind of perimeter defender. So I just ask, what buttons do Toronto press? What matchups do they go with? And I don't know. I don't think they have a good answer on that end, even though they've been a great defense, beginning to end this season.
Yeah, I just think the Cavs offense is so damn good that it's like a real challenge for anyone to try to slow them down. I do think they're going to use Scottie primarily as the Harden defender, and I actually think he's a really good option in that matchup. He can pressure him. He can bother him with his length. He can kind of wear him down physically. And even as he extends himself defensively, he has the athleticism and, again, the length to recover on a lot of those drives and stick with Harden. So I think this could be a tricky Harden series in terms of iso ball and in terms of like his matchup with Scottie. But then, as you hinted at, like, Scottie on Harden means that he's now less valuable as an off-ball defender because he's not along the baseline where he can really use his defensive range. He's got to be worried about James Harden mostly above the break, and if he does leave Harden, then he's always this catch-and-shoot threat. And it also means more of a size advantage for Mobley when it comes to the play finishing, the offensive rebounding. Maybe if like now you are putting BI on Mobley, there's some post-up opportunities there selectively, and so you are kind of put in a bind where the Cavs just have a lot of offensive weapons and you don't necessarily have like all the defensive pieces you need to match up because like not many teams do at all. And then I think really the challenge is how do you deal with Donovan Mitchell because they like shed on him. Other than that though, like when you look at the starters, I really don't think they have a good answer. It'll probably mostly be RJ, but I just don't think they can bother Mitchell at the point of attack or with rim protection. And so I'm kind of feeling a big Donovan Mitchell series here. I think he's going to create a lot of really good offense for the team. And then you have just the totality of all of the shooting around these guys. Like you said it, they've been an insane offense when Mitchell and Harden share the floor. Like whenever Mitchell was on the floor this year, even without James Harden, the Cavs have a 123 offensive rating. He's just been a machine. And I look at the Raptors offense and I'm like, in terms of playoff offense, yikes. Like there's a lot of concerns that I have there. And so I kind of think what the Raptors need to do if they want a chance in this series, and I don't really think they have one, but like I think they really need to prioritize their defense and they need to make this series kind of ugly and they need to do everything they can to win with defense and athleticism and transition and the possession margin because that's the stuff that they're really good at. And so just go all the way in on your strengths. Like they're +9 in transition points per game this year. They are third in transition scoring, and they're second in terms of allowing the fewest transition points. So there's an opportunity for them to build up some margin there. They're also really good in the turnover margin, +2.5 per game. And then I do think when it comes to maxing out your defense, that's where I look at Shed and Colin Murray-Boyles as really important role players for them because I still think there's some weirdness with like the RJ and BI minutes together, especially. I just think there's some redundancies there and like you're not maxing out what you can be defensively, but RJ is weird playing off the ball. And so like, I just want to see some more mixing and matching. And I think they need Shed as a point of attack defender, but I also like having his ball handling and passing offensively. And then Colin Murray-Boyles, good athletic, versatile defender, brings good size, also awesome on the offensive glass when it comes to creating a bit of margin there. And I actually want to see a lot of Colin Murray-Boyles at the 5 because I want to see Toronto switching everything. I think that's their greatest strength defensively is the ability to do that in those lineups. I don't really see a ton of value with Jakob Poeltl in this series outside of the rebounding because I do worry about that with CMB at the 5. I worry about that with Mamu at the 5. Like Poeltl is really their only strong rebounding big man, but also like defensively, I don't want to have a big who has to sit in drop when I'm going up against James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. I want somebody who has some range, who has some ability to guard in space. And then offensively, like, I think a big challenge for the Raptors is going to be, do we have a look that can pull these bigs out into space? Do we have a way to get Jared Allen and Evan Mobley out of the paint where they're not as disruptive to our offense? And Pirtle obviously is like just exclusively a paint scoring presence. So I think if you go with Murray Boyles at the 5 and he has that ability to switch onto like a James Harden where now you're trying to force him to beat you as an isolation scorer and you can limit his playmaking value and you're not allowing him to like spoon feed Mobley and Allen off the roll, I do think that's a win for the defense. And so I think there's an angle where the Raptors are just like, we're all about the stuff that I said, and they can make it harder on the Cavs offense. But then the question is, all right, you didn't really have any margin to give up offensively, Toronto, and now maybe you have given up a little bit, and you're just always fighting an uphill battle because their offense isn't nearly as talented as Cleveland's.
That's what I keep coming back to with this series because I do like Toronto as a team, and I think that they do a lot of things really well. And like specifically, I wonder about the wing and big size component in totality for Toronto, where like they do have a Scotty, a BI, an RJ, a Colin Murray Boyles, a Mamu, and then you look at the Cleveland roster, and it's like the only guy that they have beyond Mobley, kind of even like that, is Dean Wade, right? So I do think there's a little bit of a size advantage there. But when I think about this matchup, Cleveland just has such a different level of offensive ease, and maybe that's obvious, but like even with the bench units they run, where I really worry about Toronto having one bad stretch a game, where you see it with Cleveland, where it'll be tight ball game, haymaker, 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 teams are dueling, trading. All of a sudden, Cleveland has ripped off a 15-0 run and spanked your ass, clapped you, game is done.
Oh my, graphic.
And I just don't know how Toronto gets that easy, quick, rapid offense if it's not in transition. So maybe you're right. I'm just trying to think about, you're not going to even it up on both sides of the ball against Cleveland. So I think you're right. I think it's about getting gimmicky. It's about trying something and seeing how can you leverage your advantages with your roster. And I don't see it offensively. So maybe that is the play. Yeah. Maybe it is leaning all the way in on speed, switching, beating them in transition, because that's the thing with Cleveland, man. I look at Cleveland as like this powder keg where you can bottle them up for a quarter. You can bottle them up for 2 quarters. There is going to come a point in the game where they explode and they rip off an incredible run because it is so easy for them. They have all these great play finishers. They have 2 high-level elite ball handlers and offensive creators, and then they've just got this incredible shooting everywhere where Toronto doesn't have that. So I don't know, man. I'm trying to figure out what that advantage for Toronto is, and I'm thinking about it. Maybe it is that speed and size and athleticism that Toronto should lean on.
I think so, because like you just want to do something to make them uncomfortable. If you guys just sort of go mano a mano in this one, like I think that's going to be a pretty comfortable win for the Cavs.
Do you think Scotty's the best Harden defender in this series?
Definitely. Yeah.
Who do you think's the best Donnie defender for Donovan Mitchell? Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's really, really hard to be able to guard both of those guys. Like, that's just the reality of it. But maybe at some point they try Scotty on Mitchell if he's really frying them. I just don't think he's quick enough for that matchup. And it's like, if you can take Harden out of his game, that's a big win. That's a big win. But again, like, that's not just about can you guard him one-on-one with Scotty. That also means, okay, now he starts getting into the pick and roll game. Is he getting too comfortable stuff there? Is he able to create a lot of shots for his teammates? Is he able to hunt other perimeter defenders by just whatever, calling up their man to set a screen for them? Like, because he is James Harden, and so you don't stop him with one man. And the Cavs offense is just a machine. That's the problem. And the Raptors offense just isn't very good, like 15th in offensive rating this year, but I don't trust BI, really. I think he is inconsistent just because he's not somebody who really pressures a defense. He relies a lot on just sort of the over-the-top shot making and does so with like meh efficiency and meh playmaking. I don't really trust RJ because the shot with him can be so inconsistent. And again, sometimes those guys playing together like doesn't really work very well offensively. And just overall, the shooting with this team is pretty bad. You're 26th in threes made, 22nd in three-point percentage. You've got a questionable shooter like RJ. You've got a non-shooting big in Pirtle. You've got a bad three-point shooter overall in Scotty Barnes. And so it's an offense that is overall pretty reliant on paint scoring. A lot of guys who want to get downhill. And Cleveland's got phenomenal rim protection. And the Raptors don't really have great looks to pull those bigs out of the paint. Again, that's where I think Mamu can become interesting as this skilled perimeter shooting five. But then you're giving up something pretty massive defensively and on the glass. And Toronto's already a pretty mediocre rebounding team. I don't think you want to be giving Cleveland like a bunch of extra chances on the offensive glass because Mamu's just weak in that respect. So I also don't think they really have the ability to attack Cleveland's guards defensively like a lot of other playoff offenses do, because Harden and Mitchell, that's the weak point of this defense, right? But I don't really see who's just going to like bring them into the action and feast off of them.
That would be the only thing that I'm worried about with Cleveland's defense, I think, is just them two as point of attack guys. And yeah. I guess it's just RJ, but I mean,
RJ and IQ just don't like worry me that much. And then if it's like Scotty trying to get a switch, it's like, all right, if he tries to go at Harden as like a sort of ISO post-up mismatch, it's like that's actually where Harden holds his own most defensively. And so
I can see
I just
Scotty
don't see the advantages.
But it's not
much.
Enough. It's not going to add up enough over like the duration of a series. I tend to agree.
Yeah, I just think it's a very flawed offense going up against a really awesome offense. And it's a Cleveland defense that has enough answers, right? Like, when I look at who should be the fifth starter for them alongside the two guards and the two bigs, I'd probably go with Jalen Tyson because he's a really good offensive player. And then you can also put him on BI. They've been loving the Dean Wade minutes. They've been loving Dean Wade starting. And like Dean Wade is a good option to throw at BI too because he's even a little bit taller and longer and he's a really good defender. But I just think the offensive gap in favor of Tyson outweighs that. And like the Tyson Mitchell minutes have just been killer this year. They're a plus 13 net team when they have both those guys out there. So you get the dual rim protector and you get a good wing defender, and these lineups are amazing offensively. And then also, Cleveland is for sure going to play zone in this series, like probably a lot of it, because they really like to play zone. The Raptors, because of their shooting concerns, have faced a ton of zone, and they are a 10th percentile offense versus zone. And there's just so much that you can do with Mobley. You can put him at the top of a zone. You can go zone with the double bigs, and you can deploy a 2-3, and you can have him looming on the baseline, and you can have like both him and Jared Allen fucking shit up in the paint. Like, there's just a lot that they can do with their rim protection in that way, keeping their best rim protectors around the basket and testing the Raptors shooting. It's a pretty good strategy to mix in. So I just think overall it's very, very hard for me to see the Raptors like making this a real series because the offensive gap is that big. And there's little things you can question with Cleveland, like, okay, what does it look like for Mobley offensively, right? Because, I mean, he's been super good as like a finisher recently, but he still had the free throw issues. He still had the 3-point issues. If you do match up Scotty with him, like that's a pretty difficult assignment. But I still think it's like Mobley's never going to really force himself on the game offensively. He's just going to kind of take what is there for him. So it's just not that big of a swing factor when he has Donovan Mitchell and James Harden creating shots. And then another big thing is like we're talking about Toronto having to like so aggressively slant towards defense, athleticism, etc., to try to like make this more of a matchup. I think both of these teams have key chess pieces off the bench, but I think the Cavs have more, and I think the Cavs can just put together the more complete lineups where like they can put together pretty good defensive groups, but they're awesome offensively. Whereas it's like for the Raptors to get their best defensive groups, you got some real offensive questions. It's just the totality of like Tyson, Wade, Merrill, Strus, Keon, Schroeder. Like there's a lot of good bench players who give them different looks if you're Cleveland. So I have them winning in 5. I just think they're a much better basketball team. And it's tough for me to overlook like how massive the difference in my confidence in these offenses is compared to the difference in how I view these defenses, which is still there. I think Toronto's the better defense, but the gap is not nearly as big.
Yeah, I've got Cleveland in 6. I think Toronto will steal one or two with their size. I think that uh, I can see Harden having a down game. This is more so. I just think Cleveland might play with their food a little bit, and Toronto will steal an extra one. Like, and they are. It's Toronto's balanced. Like, they've got a lot of solid contributors, but I couldn't have them go out in 5. I think they're too good of a team to get bounced just off of 1, so I think they get 2. But I agree with you. I am closer to 5 than I am for Toronto pushing this the distance.
I don't think they're too good of a team to lose in 5, and I think Cleveland is a good enough team to beat them in 5. So that's why I have them losing in 5. Okay, so those are all the playoff series we know about for now. Real quick before we get out of here, Logan, just give me your vibes for these 7-8 play-in games. We've got the Sixers hosting the Magic in the East. Of course, you gave Joel Embiid appendicitis because you're a horrible, horrible, miserable guy. So there's still no return timeline for him. It doesn't seem like we're going to see him in the first round. And all my fucking Sixers hope and the little victory lap I got to take when you came over to our side, Logan, it was all a trick. It was all a ploy by you to just doubly curse the Sixers, you sick individual. But what are you thinking for that game?
I'm actually going to take Philly. I don't know. I think is as bad as the hex I put on Philly is. I hate the vibes in Orlando.
Man.
I hate the vibes in Orlando worse, man.
It's pretty valid. I think rationally, we should probably pick Orlando just because the Sixers have been very middling without Embiid. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for me to pick the Magic to like win a meaningful basketball game right now.
Yeah,
the vibes are so bad. The fit is so weird. So you know what? Fuck it. Give me a Maxey Masterclass. Give me a PG Masterclass. Give me the Sixers to advance to then get their asses beat in the first round by the Celtics, probably without Joel Embiid even setting foot on the floor. But you know what? We'll take them in the playoffs. Suns-Blazers is the matchup out west, Logan. Who do you like?
This is an interesting game. I'm going to take Phoenix just because I'd rather bet on D-Book in an individual game. But I'm more like 50-50 on this one. Portland's got a good defense, but I'm going to bet on the best half-court player in an individual game. So I'm going to take D-Book and the Suns to get it done.
Yeah, I'll take the Suns' defense and Book, and also their coaching. I think Jordan Ott is a really good coach. I don't really know how to feel about Portland. I don't think they're really very good. I know they sort of caught on late in the season, but that happened as a lot of teams were no longer trying to win basketball games, you know? Like, they're 19th in net rating. I don't really trust much about their offense, and the defense was not what I thought it would be coming into the year. I thought they could be like a top 10 defense, and it's been better lately, but I just don't know who I really believe in with Portland when it comes to like the key options, especially with Denny, like just the shot completely falling off for him in the second half of the season. I think I'm going to lean on the Suns for those reasons, although they do have the Jalen Green tax, and that is pretty significant. But
and the Portland Trailblazers have the Donovan Clingan plus, so
they do have the Donovan Clingan bonus, which is significant. But I could see this going either way. I'm going to take the Suns, though. I also think the Suns would be a more interesting first-round matchup for the Spurs because their defense actually really gave Wemby some trouble earlier in the year.
Portland, I think, gets swept.
Yeah, I just don't think Portland is an interesting matchup for anybody. Not that the Suns are like that great, but as a Warriors fan, I am devastated that the Clippers fell to the 9 seed. I wanted so badly for the path to be Clippers, you go ahead, you win the 7-8 game because I think the Clippers are absolutely the best team out of all of these. Give us Portland. We'll beat Portland now that Steph's back on the court, and then we can beat the Suns in the second game. No disrespect, but now it's like the Clippers in the 9-10. Fuck. Let me just hope for a great Steph game and a Steph Kawhi duel. But then it's like, even if we beat the Clippers, I'll be bummed to not see the Clippers in a playoff series.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather see the Clippers play the Spurs or the Thunder than see the Suns or the Blazers play those teams. Again, no disrespect. No disrespect. I just think the Blazers are kind of bummy. No disrespect. No hate. And the Suns have Jalen Green, which sucks. But
and the Clippers
we'll see.
The Terminator and the Warriors have freaking Steph, man.
And the Clippers have Darius Garland. And God, I want to see Darius Garland in the playoffs. But we'll see how this all shakes out. We will be live tomorrow night, so we'll see you guys after these games. And we'll have a couple more playoff series to talk about on Wednesday. It'll be a ton of fun. Pretty freaking intensive breakdowns here, Logan, huh? But that's just what we do at Nerd Sesh. We get into the weeds, and we're on weed, and we're smoking weed, and we're doing grass, and we're using again. Mm-hmm. You're using again. Mm-hmm. And you're off that herb and that devil's lettuce
off that loud, that ganja, that stank.
You disgust me, and I think
boof pack.
You're an immoral man because of what you do in your free time and your leisure time in regards to cannabis. So there you have it, guys. This was our podcast. This was our viral podcast. It's me and my buddy Logan Camden, and we're known as Nerd Sesh. So we'll see you guys, again, every day for a long time if you want to join us. You know where to find us. YouTube, all our full episodes, and our video essays that we do. You can listen to the podcast across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. And with that, as always, we appreciate you guys oh so much. Make sure that you have playoff mode activated because we certainly do. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.